Chapter 367. The starry sky on the title page was obviously just an illusion, but the changes in the format pyramid were real. Luo Nan couldn't sit still on the bed. He got up and circled around the bed. He had an intense premonition. He had studied formatting theory for over 5 years. Perhaps it was only now that he truly touched upon the threshold of his grandfather's core research. What should I do next? What should I do next? Luo Nan's mind was originally quite clear. He had made preparations for today's closed-door training to tackle difficult problems. But he never expected that his beginning would go so smoothly. It went so smoothly that he lost control. After the format pyramid transformed into a star atlas, all of his previous plans were completely nullified. He needed to sort out a general train of thought based on his new structure. But the true problem was that it wasn't that he had too few ideas. It was that he had too many. He threw himself onto the bed and picked up his split-page notebook. He wrote and drew in a venting manner. Soon, another 6 or 7 blank pages were filled with words, diagrams, and symbols. And there were still endless impulses that tried to jump out from his brain. Luo Nan never thought that he would be stuffed to death by inspiration one day. It was already 11:30 by the time he recovered from his work of memorizing inspiration. The AI butler followed the designed program and made lunch. It invited the only diner in the house to the table. Luo Nan had been evaporating his brain power for the entire morning. His consumption was extraordinary. His instincts began to alarm him. He simply picked up his notebook and went downstairs. He was prepared to continue pondering and writing during his meal. He would not waste time. Luo Nan absent-mindedly ate a few mouthfuls of food, but he wrote and drew half a page of words and symbols. He didn't feel that there was anything wrong with this. He could even continue doing this at the dining table. Another preset reminder came at this time. It's time for the afternoon class. Sweat it out, young man. The hex ear vibrated. Shui Lei's thick voice was mixed with stifled laughter. It was exceptionally comical. This was a reminder he had recorded a few days ago when he had nothing better to do. It was specifically set up to control his work and rest time. Gym Master Xiu's teachings were intrinsically very rigorous. He paid the most attention to habits and tempo. He believed that good cultivation habits and efficient tempo were the foundation for achieving martial accomplishments. This was especially true after Luo Nan achieved success in the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. The demands on his side were even higher. Aside from unavoidable circumstances or extremely special circumstances, Luo Nan's morning classes, evening classes, and afternoon classes were all unshakable. Luo Nan couldn't be lazy. Shui Lei was a good friend, and at the same time, he was the most serious and inflexible supervisor. After over a dozen days of strict control, Luo Nan had already formed an initial cultivation rhythm under the external supervision and internal urging. And because of the true feedback from the internal refinement technique, he would be a bit unaccustomed to messing up his rhythm. Luo Nan looked at his watch and struggled a few times in his mind. In the end, he closed his eyes and pushed his notebook to the side. He sped up his eating speed. The benefits of coming in contact with the mouth and tongue acupoint yesterday were also evident. His digestive tract's ability to decompose water grains and transform essence qi had improved significantly. Luo Nan vaguely felt that what he was eating wasn't a tasteless, nutritious meal. Instead, it was strands of essence energy that seeped into his body. The essence energy endlessly circulated throughout his body as he ate, making up for his lack of energy. The progress is excellent, and the vital energy in the 5 viscera is stable. There's no obvious imbalance. According to Gym Master Xiu's words, the root receptacle is thick and the foundation is firm. It's enough to bear. Hiss. Luo Nan suddenly realized something. He nearly stabbed his chopsticks into his nostrils as he subconsciously ate his food. He couldn't care less about his sorry state. His mind spun. The progress of the body gear is under Gym Master Xiu's control. Although it's still weaker than the God gear, it's solid with every step. The so-called body is like a mountain, densely planted with thick soil. It's not bad at all. In comparison, the God gear driven by formatting theory is advancing like a hurricane. The growth is out of control, and it's already quite troublesome. If I were to be urged by a flash of inspiration and erupt a second time, would I still want this little life of mine? Luo Nan's back was drenched in sweat when he thought of this. He flipped through his notebook once more, and he immediately crossed out all the radical and bold plans. Then he searched for the relatively conservative plans that advanced step by step and carefully pondered over them. That's right. My root receptacle isn't thick in the research of formatting theory. My root nature is unclear, and my root trigger is advanced. I need to carefully sculpt and solidify my foundation before I make any plans. In this way, the idea of turning sketch into sketch is quite appropriate. Luo Nan slapped the table and made up his mind. He poured the food into his mouth in a few mouthfuls, tidied up a bit, and went upstairs for his afternoon class. Luo Nan performed a round of cultivation. The vital energy of his 5 viscera circulated, and the light trembled of his muscles, skin, and flesh. Luo Nan very naturally captured a moment of calmness. He took advantage of this moment to switch to clairvoyance towards the living starry sky. He began his afternoon research. Compared to the flashes of inspiration and the successive bursts of intensity in the morning, his mind was set in the afternoon. His state of mind was much calmer. He just quietly observed this marvelous and gorgeous starry sky. However, he didn't use the logic of formatting theory. Instead, he used the eyes of a painter. Luo Nan had first pondered over the drawing method of life sketches. It was a time of great danger. The argument was made in haste, and time was tight. He exhausted all of his accumulated knowledge at the time, the out-of-body experience, the pattern and rhythm of soul breathing, the understanding of configuration, the operational structure of energy and information. This included his many years of sketching skills, his experience in drawing thousands upon thousands of sketches, and his keen grasp of a character's characteristics. Luo Nan was able to integrate super complex elements to complete such a magnificent masterpiece. It was enough to be proud of. But from the harshest point of view, there was always a difference in judging standards between a rushed work and a meticulous work. In the end, a life sketch was just a sketch. It was a rough impression captured through the use of sketching techniques. Composition, proportion, structure, and all sorts of details were far from perfect. Needless to say, Luo Nan was still lacking far too much at the time. He didn't have the ability to bear the burden. He didn't have the insight and experience. But now, through learning from Gym Master Xiao, cramming in the basic knowledge of the inner world, and practicing the coupling effects of the God gear and the body gear, Luo Nan patched up one flaw after another. He was like a young painter who had achieved minor success in his craft. Luo Nan turned his head and looked at the draft he first practiced with. It was too horrible to look at, but he knew where the flaws were and how to fix them. The overall order of the living starry sky existed, but the precision of the diagram was lacking. The image was large and impractical. It had already formed a basic mold, but there was practically no room for refinement. If Luo Nan wanted to fix it, he would have to transform the star atlas into the format pyramid and the star atlas into reality. These were his directions. Luo Nan slowly adjusted his breathing. The starry sky pieced together from the life sketches was like a newly completed composition. A draft of the structure was just waiting for him to use the tip of his brush to outline even more exquisite layers of light and shade, to reveal even more crucial details. Chapter 368. Luo Nan decided on a preliminary direction, but he wasn't in a hurry to get started. Just like a qualified painter, Luo Nan would never hastily put his brush to work. What he faced was not a blank piece of paper, but a deep and complex starry sky. He flipped through the split-page notebook in his hand, found a blank page, and wrote solemnly with a pen, "The first rule begins with me. Push yourself to others." Looking at the current situation, the easiest and smoothest choice to correct the life sketch was external clairvoyance. Driver Qin was a good example. At that level, the answer was already laid out before his eyes. But Luo Nan was fully aware that this was not enough. Without the link of self-reference, it would be hard to estimate what kind of flaws would exist in the work. The first version of the life sketch was limited by Luo Nan's level of understanding at the time. It practically lost the space for further refinement. Luo Nan needed to take this as a warning. But it must be known that self-reflection had always been a difficult part of cultivation. It was said that the most important thing was to know oneself. Gym Master Xiao had emphasized this last night with similar words, and Luo Nan had said early on that he wasn't good at self-portraits. These were not words of modesty. Of course, looking at it from another angle, high consumption often represented high returns. Although this method was difficult, it was a process of defining principles and standards. Only by polishing oneself would one be able to reflect external objects more clearly. The essence of the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger subdivision techniques taught by Gym Master Xiao were here. Luo Nan chose a path that was difficult at first, then easy at the end. He needed to climb the steepest peak. Only in this way could he solidify his foundation and avoid the fatal danger of formatting theory's uncontrollable growth. Luo Nan paused for a moment, then wrote another line, the second rule, observation comes first. Multidimensional reproduction. Luo Nan used his drawing techniques to take a picture of the living starry sky. Whether it was sketching or sketching, neither was a skill that relied on imagination. He needed to have a real object of observation. There was nothing much to say. Luo Nan's object of observation was himself. This was not a simple drawing in a mirror. Instead, he needed to probe the frame of body and soul. He needed to take the form and the soul, and he needed to correspond with the form of the star atlas. Most of the various elements involved the mental plane. Thoughts were chaotic, and it was easier said than done to seek them. Perhaps he could only use the God will, body wheel, visualization diagram, root receptacle, root nature, root trigger, and other levels of reference to find the greatest common divisor. This would undoubtedly increase Luo Nan's workload. But since he had already given up the easy and chosen the most dangerous path, he didn't mind adding a few more burdens. Luo Nan had some thoughts in his mind after he finished writing these 2 lines. They seemed to be clear, but they weren't. It was hard for them to be fully expressed. He subconsciously twirled his pen, and his other hand lifted up the slightly yellow pages that were smeared with sweat. Luo Nan's gaze streaked across the pages of the notebook one by one. He once again swept his eyes over the dozen or so records of inspiration that contained an enormous amount of information. A moment later, he casually flipped through his previous handwriting. This included a limited number of paintings on paper. If he didn't include the records of his inspirations, although his notebook was thick, there weren't many meaningful things in it. Among them, the most valuable should be the 2 psychic diagrams. The other one was slightly smaller. It was the outline of the wraith sign that he had drawn at school. It was more abstract. As for the other one, even though it had been painted into a mess by the glitter pen, the overall structure and the relevant details were much more specific, but there were also rich symbolic meanings. Yes, that was the prison sketch. It was the diagram that Luo Nan drew when he was imprisoned in the confinement room on ship Lanshan under the catalysis of inspiration. He comprehended the profoundness of "my heart's a prison" from this, truly obtaining extraordinary power. My heart's a prison? Luo Nan's mind suddenly stirred, and his dark thoughts suddenly brightened. Since he was going to revise it, how could he skip over these important points? He immediately moved his pen, forming words on the previous page. Third principle, concreteness. Crucial links. The 3 principles on the paper were arranged in order, and the scope of their expressions shrunk one by one. By the time he reached the 3rd principle, he had touched upon the substantive level. He could begin to work on it. My heart's a prison had a special role in Luo Nan's formatting theory research process. If Luo Nan really wanted to make a move, choosing this node was quite suitable. After experiencing the impact and sharpening of many events, Luo Nan now had a relatively clear concept in his heart. My heart's a prison, including formatting theory itself, was essentially the materialization of some sort of compelling rule. It was just like what he sensed from the depths of the mental plane during the incident at Frost River Reality. It was an inconceivable order frame. It was internalized into the structure of a person's body and soul to achieve the final result. Luo Nan found a more appropriate explanation of Eastern metaphysics during the time he was learning from Jim Master Shio. One with the world. There was a similar statement in the classical scriptures. It was said, man follows the earth follows the heaven follows the Tao, and the Tao follows nature. All right, he had to admit that the words of Eastern metaphysics were far too rich in meaning. There were often many interpretations. It was very likely that he would be led into a ditch if he were to chew on the words one by one. He simply used this kind of imagery to draw a classical visualization diagram on his notebook. It was a combination of a tetrahedron, an inscribed sphere, and an outer-scribed sphere. The inscribed sphere symbolized the self format, the outer-scribed sphere symbolized the heaven and earth format, and the tetrahedron in the middle represented the societal format. From the perspective of a pure cultivator, he could temporarily discard the societal format. He could pay more attention to the relationship between the self format and the heaven and earth format. However, this topic itself was far too large. It didn't conform to the principle of concreteness. Luo Nan simply discarded it. He no longer considered the overall framework. He only sculpted the details. In other words, he gave up on the large topic of how to create the heaven and earth format. He chose the following branch. How to manifest the creation of the heaven and earth format with the self format. It seemed to be too large. Then he continued to choose. As he went down the levels, Luo Nan's mind became clearer and clearer. The basis for his choice became clearer and clearer. He didn't even need to think about things like fundamental theories. Right now, he had yet to reach the level of explaining phenomena and forming theories. Discovering problems, observing phenomena, collecting data, and then summarizing basic logic was everything he could do for now and for a period of time to come. If he were to start from the basic phenomena, there was a fact that was very clear. What was Luo Nan's most substantial gain after comprehending, my heart's a prison? A low crashing sound rang in the quiet bedroom. The answer was the heavily chained crow. This inconceivable materialized image had helped Luo Nan's soul leave his body. It had subdued the human-faced arachnid's avatar. It had accumulated his first bucket of gold. It had also grabbed Luo Nan and set him on the fast track of uncontrollable development. In that case, why would there be? Oh, let's give up on the why. Right now Luo Nan just wanted to know what sort of shape the heavily chained crow would take after he pulled it out of the format pyramid after the Star Atlas transformation. What sort of changes would occur? This was the first lesson of his observations. Chapter 369. The trembling of the chains spread out on the mental plane, continuing without end. But Luo Nan waited and waited, and the familiar dark chains remained hidden in the core of the living starry sky. Fragments of structure flickered faintly, but Luo Nan was unable to see its concrete form. Hiss. It can't be that after the Star Atlas transformation, all my previous achievements had been reset to zero, right? It was hard for Luo Nan's imagination to run wild when he encountered an unexpected situation. He attempted to enter a deeper level of clairvoyance within the format pyramid Star Atlas, but just as his thoughts stirred, some structure seemed to melt away in the outermost region of the format pyramid. It's the circumscribed circle. The blurry spherical silhouette representing the heaven and earth format was like an inflating bubble. It rapidly expanded until it reached its limit, and then it shattered. The stars flickered as it transformed into the vaster depths of the starry sky. Luo Nan did not know what this phenomenon represented. At the very least, his frame of body and soul, his god gear, and his body gear did not show any adverse reactions. Before his thoughts settled, another layer of structure melted away. It was the tetrahedron representing the social format. The situation was similar to that of the circumscribed circle. The corresponding stars shifted and spread, silently merging into the living starry sky. The two outer layers of structure peeled away and melted away, forming two waves of dazzling fireworks in the living starry sky. They dazzled the eyes for a moment, but they disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Luo Nan's scalp went numb. If the self-format did this again, his frame of body and soul might not be able to hold on, and his mental defenses might collapse first. What he feared had come. The only remaining spherical star atlas silhouette in the core region was like a deformed heart amidst Luo Nan's turbulent state of mind. It suddenly expanded and contracted along with Luo Nan's breathing and heartbeat. Then it expanded and contracted again. Luo Nan's attention was practically drawn to this peculiar movement pattern after 5 or 6 consecutive rounds of expansion and contraction. But it was only practically. Luo Nan paid attention to the outline of the self-format from beginning to end. He watched helplessly as it expanded and contracted, beginning to expand inconceivably in this pattern. After a few rounds of expansion and contraction, the spherical star atlas had already expanded 3 to 4 times its original size. But its density did not decrease because of the expansion. On the contrary, more and more stars appeared at the very core, gradually forming a dense cluster of stars like a silver sphere. At this point, the format of the tetrahedron, the inscribed circle, and the circumscribed sphere had already become history. Only this brilliant cluster of stars remained. It was like the core of a galaxy formed from billions of stars in the true universe. It sat at the very center of the living starry sky. It's good that it didn't collapse. Luo Nan sought joy in the midst of bitterness. He was just about to go and observe these changes in greater detail when the sound of chains, which he had nearly forgotten, rang out once more from the depths of the brilliant and splendid constellation. It carried a special rhythm that covered every corner of his range of perception. At the same time, an invisible and boundless power accompanied it, spreading throughout the starry sky, distorting the darkness in all directions. The stars in the sky and the millions of life sketches circled around it. Luo Nan was able to clearly sense some sort of obscure law using this incorporeal yet boundless power as a carrier. It was laid out layer by layer, invading practically every single life sketch. A headache and dizziness were Luo Nan's first reactions. This was because the first thing that was impacted by this rule was his general knowledge of the basic spatial order around him. The living starry sky was distorted. The near became far, and the far became near. It was originally at the top, but it suddenly fell to the bottom. The corresponding understanding was completely destroyed. It couldn't go on like this. If a painter could not even understand the most basic concept of space, then his painting would basically be meaningless. Luo Nan hoped to restore his cognitive order. He deeply sensed the living starry sky, using interference power to borrow the material plane to anchor his position anew. For this reason, the God gear and body gear interlocked and rotated. The spiritual light of the eye's orifice transformed into a heart lantern. It drove the energy of his internal organs, and it cast itself towards the boundless starry sky of the mental plane. The results of clairvoyance became more and more subtle. The boundless Milky Way had hundreds and thousands of constellations. They naturally resonated with the heart lantern of the eye's orifice, but they were all different. Some were dim and lightless, while others became especially eye-catching. Whether they were bright or dark had nothing to do with the distance between them in physical space. It was even more chaotic. Luo Nan was already riding a tiger, unable to back down. He could only continue clairvoyance. The heart lantern transformed into a beam of sensing light, making contact with the glittering targets one by one. In an instant, the warped distance of physical space became meaningless. The heart lantern of the eye's orifice was like a beam of light that descended from the heavens. It pierced into the more practical world of reality from the mental plane. Darkness assaulted Luo Nan's face, but it was pierced through in the blink of an eye. The barrier between the material plane and the mental plane was already weak and powerless before Luo Nan. Under the illumination of the heart lantern, the light and shadow of reality interweaved and combined, reflecting a fuzzy figure that gradually grew clearer. And so, Luo Nan saw a majestic black man. His upper body was bare, and he quietly sat cross-legged in a secret room. He was like a statue. His pitch-black skin was covered in a layer of dense beads of sweat, and the distinct lines of his fascia and muscles were trembling. It was clear that he was not as tranquil as he appeared on the surface. Luo Nan recognized this person. He was Black Tiger Bays. He was the vice commander of the Knights of Equity of the Order of Justice of Xia City. He was an expert with an extraordinarily powerful fleshly talent. During the incident at Frost River Reality, this fellow was a fierce general under Wang. He was an enemy of Luo Nan's side, and he fought brilliantly against the ears of truth, Fairchild. But in the end, he was used as a sacrifice by Wang to release the power of the scales of truth. During the sacrifice, the element of chaos was replaced, causing Bei's foundation to be nearly completely destroyed. In the end, Fairchild, who cherished talent, saved him. Fairchild then requested Luo Nan to lend a helping hand, entering the order frame to maintain his livelihood. Bei relied on Luo Nan's order frame to survive. In this sense, Bei was also one of Luo Nan's believers. But Luo Nan did not have the power to control this wild and unruly fellow. He had no interest in ordering him around. Many times, he nearly forgot about Bei. Luo Nan never expected that his subconscious clairvoyance would select this person. With Luo Nan's current eyesight and knowledge, coupled with the close relationship between the two, the heart lantern of the eye's orifice descended upon Bei's most essential location. His muscles and bones were strong, but his internal organs were weak. His vital energy was scattered. His human frame had collapsed. Only by following the order frame bestowed upon him could he survive. Bei was still in the recovery period. Even though Luo Nan had given him the support of the order frame, Luo Nan only understood half of it at the time. There were many areas where the information was fuzzy. The relevant adjustments and adaptations were a large project. Luo Nan could feel Bei's hardships and impatience, but there was even more tenacity and callousness. Perhaps Bei had paid attention to the heart lantern of the eye's orifice for too long, but Bei seemed to sense something. His eyelids trembled slightly, and he immediately opened them. Luo Nan could see that Bei's thick lips were slightly curled up. There was a bit of ridicule in his eyes, but it was unknown which side he was referring to. In the next moment, Bei raised his arms and raised his head. He assumed a strange pious posture, as if he wanted to embrace the holiness of the void. Chapter 370. Oh, this wild and unruly fellow. Luo Nan didn't go so far as to consider himself a god. He wouldn't lose his bearings just because of a few words from Bei. The light of the heart lantern of the eye's orifice pointed directly at Bei's essence. Luo Nan naturally used the division technique he had just learned from Gym Master Shou. Yes, there was also the relevant information that Fairchild had told him before he left. Luo Nan had a general judgment of Bei. This fellow pursued power without end. There was only power in his eyes. He didn't care about being restricted at all, especially when it came to the so-called gods, doctrines, and other illusory matters. The root receptacle could be remolded. The root nature could be controlled. The root trigger was appropriate. It seemed like it could be done. What Luo Nan lacked the most right now was observation and verification. His thoughts spun in a circle, and the beam of light from the heart lantern of the eye's orifice dropped down, piercing between Bei's eyebrows. It was at this moment that Luo Nan realized with horror that the sound of chains under the living starry sky grew clearer. The incorporeal and boundless power merged with the beam of light from the heart lantern of the eye's orifice. It ignored the distance between space and itself as it pierced into Bei's body. The interference power of the heart lantern was not worth mentioning in front of a powerful Birank. However, the marvelous power of distortion it carried was instantly displayed on Bei's body. Bei's reaction was huge. His cheeks contorted, and the muscles of his body violently twitched. Even so, Bei opened his mouth to reveal an ugly and unbridled smile. Bang! The hard bed beneath Bei inexplicably split open. Dust flew everywhere. He stood up and landed on the ground. He staggered a bit, but he still maintained a posture of stretching out his arms and raising his head. He looked more like a fanatic than anyone else. In reality, this fellow was just excited. He only believed in power that belonged to him. Bei's foundation had been corroded by the chaos element, and he had been repeatedly tortured by the half-baked rule that Luo Nan had given him. He was at the weakest point of his life. His internal organs, muscles, bones, skin, and flesh were only in shape. His functions were scattered. But under the illumination of the heart lantern of the eye's orifice, the marvelous power of distortion of the living starry sky poured in. The power of distortion represented some sort of hidden and powerful rule of order. Baze didn't lack anything. He just lacked a power of order that could integrate the functions of his chaotic body. So he celebrated the internalization of the rule. The rule itself was a set of chains and fences that were difficult to break free from. As long as there was power, anything was possible. To others, this sort of order and rules was a prison, but to Baze, it was the toughest backbone. It was the foundation and guarantee that he could achieve his goals. Baze staggered 2 or 3 steps before he managed to steady himself. His eyes were ferocious and glowed with a green light. After holding back for more than 20 days, this guy was like a hungry beast, looking for food in the wilderness. His hunting ground was the big city outside. In the next moment, the iron door of the quiet room, along with the door frame, was kicked off the wall and flipped over. The members of the Order of Justice, who were responsible for taking care of him and monitoring him in passing, were all dumbstruck. Baze strode forward and raised his hands high at the same time. He shouted at the ceiling, or at the higher realms, in a pious and crazed manner. "Praise you." Evidently, he was quite satisfied with the formless yet powerful rules of order. He felt that the power he had gathered at his current stage was worth the price he paid. The Order of Justice of Xia City was undoubtedly at its weakest right now. After Baze reconstructed the frame of his soul, he recovered most of his strength to its peak state. Even First Ablatum Jing Shao, who was temporarily in charge of the Order of Justice, didn't have the guts to stop him. He could only let Baze swagger away. It seemed like he had done something wrong. Luo Nan watched Baze laugh loudly as he walked out. He felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. He shook his head, leaving a portion of his mind as a precaution. Then he continued his journey of clairvoyance with the heart's lantern. In the end, a weirdo like Baze was just an exception. The sky gradually darkened, and the night world of Xia City was rapidly recovering its vitality. In a dimly lit alleyway, a drunk woman was yelling in a language that no one could understand. She tore off her denim jacket and covered her forehead with it. She tried to block the invisible beam of light, to block the binding that came at the same time that terrified her even more. Of course, everything was futile. The drunk woman cursed loudly. She poured the remaining alcohol in the bottle onto her head. The alcohol flowed down her hair and dripped onto her tender shoulders, soaking her sexy, tight-fitting chest. This sort of action was unable to sober her up. The drunk woman staggered out of the alleyway, but she ran into a few mischievous hoodlums. In the next moment, the empty bottle of alcohol exploded on the heads of this group of blind fools. Luo Nan smiled wryly, and the heart's lantern spun once more. This time, the heart's lantern moved over 100 kilometers away. It was already outside the main city district of Xia City. The beam of light from the heart's lantern descended, and the specter that was shuttling through the void suddenly came to a stop. The heavily chained crow that was pulled out from the depths of the mental plane collapsed, but the incorporeal binding and pressure that followed caused the specter to instinctively tremble all the more. For a time, it didn't budge no matter how the person in charge of grazing urged it. The heart's lantern illuminated them one by one, and Luo Nan saw ink let out a coarse squawk. It ignored the restlessness of its own kind and the curses of the residents. It flew up and circled in the night sky. Luo Nan also saw Xie Junping, who was at a certain religious site. He raised his head to look all around, but he was at a loss. There was also another person. Her slender body lay quietly on a sickbed. Her eyelids moved slightly, but she never opened them. Correspondingly, a lone star that had been hidden for a long time streaked across the living starry sky. It circled half a circle before fading away once more. Everything returned to tranquility. Luo Nan looked around, and the glow of the heart's lantern grew brighter. It reflected into his heart, causing Luo Nan to suddenly come to a realization. The living starry sky was warping, but he was actually quite familiar with the order that appeared within the warping. He was even more familiar with it than the multiple explanations of the spatial order of modern physics. He lowered his head to look at the notebook in his hand. There was the classic visualization diagram that he had just drawn. Of course, there was also the title page of his grandfather's notebook, the general outline of formatting theory. The structure of a tetrahedron, inscribed sphere, and circumscribed sphere. If it weren't for this intuitive and concise diagram structure and the corresponding theory as a prerequisite, Luo Nan would probably have been lost within the bizarre laws of the living starry sky. But now he was very clear that the warping of the living starry sky was not some new toy. Instead, it was with him as the core. It was driven by him, warped by him, and divided into levels. The distance of the millions upon millions of life sketches was not calculated based on spatial distance. Instead, it was calculated based on their usefulness to him. They formed many levels, and they could be named student, employee, pilot, clergyman, politician. Yes, the intuitive structure of the star atlas format pyramid had melted away, but it was seamlessly integrated into the structure of the living starry sky. Its rules were no longer like geometric diagrams. After undergoing a high level of generalization, they appeared simple and intuitive. Instead, they were hidden deep within the living starry sky, appearing in an objective and subtle form. Perhaps Luo Nan was just a naive and clumsy student when faced with the boundless and majestic living starry sky, but he had long since obtained a standard answer. Chapter 371. Once again, Luo Nan discovered that his train of thought had run too far. What he wanted to do at first was just to observe the heavily chained crow. But who would have thought that this toy would undergo a phaseless transformation the moment he made contact with it? It transformed into an incorporeal power that enveloped the living starry sky. It naturally guided him to the level of, "My heart's a prison." The range expanded in an instant, and the relevant connections became even more complicated. Most people would not be able to separate themselves. Looking at the effects of the self-format on the living starry sky, how could one clearly distinguish between inside and outside? Right now, only the core of the dense cluster of stars still maintained the outline of the self-format. It could correspond with the classical visualization diagram. As for the societal format, the tetrahedron was already old news. This toy could be said to encompass the entire living starry sky. In any case, from the concept of formatting theory, the societal format was centered around the self. It formed a social structure that could be used by the self. There was no problem with this judgment, given the strength of the current distortion of the living starry sky. Just these 2 points encompassed everything that Luo Nan could currently observe with clairvoyance. Even so, there was still no place for the heaven and earth format. If Luo Nan still wanted to observe the heavily chained crow in this situation, he would be under the suspicion of not turning back until he hit a brick wall. Luo Nan pondered that he could set a slightly broader target for his observation. He still remembered that half a month ago, he had received Jim Master Shio's guidance in the Daoguan. He had entered a deep meditative state and had seen the internal structure of the self-format. He only remembered that the chains were crisscrossing, dense like a spiderweb, mysterious and unfathomable. Would such a situation change after the heavily chained crow mutated and became illusory? Luo Nan was even more afraid that he would do something else with this thought. He no longer hesitated, and the light of the heart lantern changed direction. This time, his telepathic thoughts successfully penetrated the dense cluster of stars. They collided head-on with the brilliant and powerful light that was like the radiance of a myriad of stars. Fortunately, such a powerful light only flashed on the mental plane. The heart lantern of the eye's orifice swayed slightly, automatically adjusting its interference strength and changing the coupling method. This wave of powerful light dissipated into nothingness. Luo Nan had once heard Jim Master Shio say that the heart lantern of the eye's orifice was the first of the 9 orifices and 6 roots in the act of introspection. After all, everyone was used to using their eyes to observe. Viewing the scenery and taking images was the most suitable habit. Especially since Luo Nan had mixed in the marvelous coupling effect. The mental plane and the material plane interfered effectively. It was like a gentle breeze and faint light. No matter how deep and indistinct the land was, it could be seen. It could be touched. The corresponding information was much more abundant. Through the effective integration of the consciousness, Luo Nan felt as if he was immersed in the scene. At this moment, it was as if Luo Nan had crashed into the center of a galaxy. It was as if he was surrounded by the twinkling stars of a high-density stellar group. It seemed to be near yet far, and it surrounded him from all directions. On the other hand, it was like he'd encountered an enormous black hole at the forefront of his thoughts. It was dark and deep, and it intended to completely swallow his mind. It was indeed different from the last deep meditation experience. Luo Nan's mind went straight to the depths of the black hole. The heart lantern of the eye's orifice pierced through the gloom, illuminating the deep space below. Wow, it's not easy. Luo Nan was a bit surprised. The clairvoyant scene before his eyes overlapped with the scene in his memories to a large extent. Formatting theory's star atlas transformation was so intense, but the core area of the self-format still maintained its basic structure. It manifested as a bottomless pit of deep space. Endless dark chains crisscrossed and weaved together, forming a complex and dense structure. Of course, the details had changed quite a bit. The last time Luo Nan's thoughts entered, the space was dark and misty. It was as if it were a black prison constructed by a demonic god. All hope was trapped, and it possessed an unshakable dignity of deep silence. Back then, he had gathered all the vital energy in his body with great difficulty. He had wanted to feed the soul flame in the depths of the prison, but it had been sucked dry by the great net of chains. In the end, only a few pitiful strands remained, and they trickled down. This was why Gym Master Xiao commented that Luo Nan couldn't use his skills on himself. Gym Master Xiao even said that Luo Nan could absorb external techniques. This was what Gym Master Xiao meant. However, many days had passed, and the situation was vastly different. Luo Nan had built his foundation through internal refinement. He had achieved success in the eye's orifice, and he had comprehended the coupling technique. The God gear and body gear meshed and revolved, and the interference between the mental and material planes deepened layer by layer. Every step of progress was clear and real. Luo Nan could see that the stability of the deep space seemed to be wavering a bit. From time to time, subtle explosions would transmit through, causing the tens of thousands of chains to rattle. Upon closer inspection, one could see some structural changes and reorganization. If one were to insist on saying that these unforeseen events were affected by the star atlas transformation, then it would be very hard to find a similar explanation for the increase in brightness and temperature of the deep black prison. The heart lantern of the eye's orifice took a look within itself. Luo Nan's thoughts did not need to dive too deep. He could clearly see the halo of light at the bottom layer through the many layers of chain structure. There was also a bit of heat that rose up, closely intersecting with the vital energy that constantly seeped in. Looking down a bit further, the soul flame could be seen within the net of chains. It was extremely lively. Especially when the beam of light from the heart lantern fell down. The energies of the two sides connected, and the soul flame became a bit crazed. It exploded and ignited, and the tail of flames soared. It broke through the lowest layer of the net of chains and was about to burn to the middle section. Luo Nan could vaguely see that the lowest layer of chains had broken. Half of the chain hung down from the tightly woven net of chains. It lay low by the side of the soul flame, receiving an even more intense calcination. There was a great sign of mutation. Wonderful. Truly wonderful. Luo Nan already had a general confirmation. If the star atlas transformation of the format pyramid was said to be the embodiment of formatting theory's external influence and method of use, then this black prison was the embodiment of his level of control and manipulation over formatting theory. In the past, he could only be said to be a user of formatting theory. He was like a driver, a jailer. He had to act strictly according to the rules drawn by formatting theory. But the current situation was clearly reflected. No matter what sort of changes the star atlas transformation of the format pyramid brought, formatting theory, this external technique, was suppressing Luo Nan's core strength. It was shaking, and Luo Nan began to obtain more and more autonomy. His progress was without a doubt. Luo Nan couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. What would happen if the soul flame completely covered this dark prison, completely incinerating these thousands upon thousands of dark chains? What sort of situation would that be? Luo Nan let out a long breath. He felt that he had gained a great deal, so he temporarily stopped his internal clairvoyance. He drew a perfect end to today's closed-door training. It was already late. His aunt and uncle would probably be back soon. It would not be good to hole up in his room any longer. Luo Nan's body fell back, and he stretched his back on the bed. He moved his muscles and bones a bit, relieving the strain of sitting for a long time. But a certain feeling collided with his mind just as he unfolded his arms. It caused his body to freeze on the spot. His soul strength seemed to have grown again. It was explosive. Chapter 372. What the hell? Luo Nan really did jump out of bed. His head instantly swelled up. This didn't make sense. He didn't have an out-of-body state. He didn't sense the wraith sign hunting. He didn't do anything else. Fine, he did quite a few things. But what did these things have to do with the explosive increase in soul strength? He immediately restrained his thoughts and returned to a more realistic plane. He observed the coupling of the god and body gears. The water level of the vast iceberg ocean continued to rise. It showed no signs of stopping. He had already jumped out of the mental plane. Was it still not over? Could it be that the "my heart's a prison" mode created vampires? Why? Fine. Why again? Luo Nan calmed his mind and tossed aside the relevant questions. He helplessly returned to the mental plane. He concentrated his mind and searched for the crux of the problem. The formatting theory system had completely merged with the living starry sky. Luo Nan also knew the standard answer in advance. He understood the relevant operating principles. Many things appeared especially intuitive. Without the tangible chains, the formatting theory system that covered the starry sky turned into an incorporeal prison. Luo Nan changed the locking mode of the chains, but the prison was simply wiped out in one go. Under the constraints of the incorporeal laws, the various living beings under the starry sky more or less reacted to Luo Nan. The vast majority of them had relatively small effects, but they could accumulate and naturally form a scale. Looking at it from this angle, Luo Nan suddenly had a hypothesis. It was just a hypothesis. The reason for the uncontrollable growth of soul strength. From the current state of the living starry sky, a complete formatting theory system was not just Luo Nan's single-person mode. It encompassed the vast structure of all living beings within the range of his perception. It was like a planetary system. Luo Nan was the sun at the center of the system. He possessed the greatest mass. He formed a gravitational force that attracted the other celestial bodies in the vast starry sky to revolve around him. A few of his believers interacted with him to a deeper degree. They were the planets, asteroids, comets, and so on of the system. The vast majority of people interacted with him to a very shallow degree. They were far away from him. They didn't even belong to this star system, but they more or less had a connection with him. If it was just a planetary system, then so be it. But there were many more links in the interaction between people. Using coupling theory to explain, the formatting theory system was composed of many gears, big and small, inside and outside, pieced together. Under the strict system of principles, they were all one, forming an exquisite internal structure. Each level, each rank, each group, each distinction. They interlocked with each other to form an exquisite transmission. In the end, all rivers converged to the core of the formatting theory system, which was Luo Nan's body. On a deeper level, the mode where multiple gears and gear sets worked together was like a gigantic machine that distorted the void. With it as the core, energy and raw materials were collected from various levels, and with that as the foundation, more and more soul power was produced. The function of this production line was too powerful, and there was no limit to it. It continued to produce until there was a relative overcapacity and an economic crisis occurred. Right now Luo Nan was facing a crisis of relative excess. Wasn't it good to have more soul energy? Of course it was good, but please give him the physique of an extraordinary first. Only then would he be able to completely digest and make use of it. What extraordinary physique? Of course, it was just wishful thinking, but since he didn't have it, it meant that he didn't have enough purchasing power. Even if he really needed it, he couldn't afford it. Even if they gritted their teeth and took out a loan to buy it, the long-term pressure of the interest would be enough to crush them. When production and consumption were out of balance, the crisis would naturally come. Luo Nan's brain began to go out of control at this point. He couldn't avoid letting his imagination run wild. He felt that he was like a factory owner who couldn't find a market, a clumsy capitalist. If the excess products could be dumped into a river or thrown into an incinerator like milk, he would gladly do it. The problem was that he couldn't even find a channel that could carry them. The void depository of the external neuron was once a deep lake, but now it was filled to the brim. As for a furnace that could incinerate soul power, it would be more refreshing to just admit that it was a hole in his brain. Luo Nan began to circle around the bed, but he couldn't completely shake off the influence of his brain. Of course, he didn't really want to find an incinerator. He just wanted to walk along the line of an economic crisis. With his newly acquired knowledge of mechanical design, he managed to come up with a strange idea. He should have intervened. A smart factory owner could completely change the function of the production line in a situation where he had sufficient capital. He could produce new products and open up new markets, even if he had to consume a bit more. TSK. It was said that he was purely observing, but in the end, he broke the rules again. But this idea that suddenly popped up was far too wonderful. He couldn't help but put in mental effort. He pondered over it. Actually, he didn't need to remodel the entire production line. He just needed to add one more link. He just needed to continuously consume the products of the work department. Burn and refine essence. This was Luo Nan's first thought. Gym Master Shio once said that this sort of refinement of essence into energy required the participation of the mind. In turn, it tempered the mind and increased its level. This was a refining process of soul power. But there were too many things to pay attention to in this course, especially when it was nearing completion. Jade gives birth to amethyst smoke was incessantly burned and refined from day to night. The essence had long since been boiled dry, and one would go berserk. Then what should he burn? Perhaps Luo Nan was affected by the hole in his brain that was the incinerator, but he was more interested in burning and refining. Suddenly, there was a muffled thud. Luo Nan kicked the lower edge of the large bed frame. He didn't care about the pain. He vented all his strength into smacking the bed. Burn and refine the external neuron. The so-called reversal of true energy used the body gear as the lead to drive the God gear. With the addition of interference effects, it could completely consume soul power. And looking at it from this angle, the body gear was like fire. The external neuron, which possessed the hollow depository, did not store soul power. It stored a lake of crude oil. Wouldn't it be possible to find something by setting a fire on it? Hold on. Only now did Luo Nan have the time to hiss in pain. He rubbed his toes. The pain brought him a sense of crisis. He had to admit that this idea was too rash. There were no actual phenomena or data to support it. A single mishap would lead to an unsalvageable situation. He needed to do a few experiments and gather some data before making a decision. After all, the external neuron was not a part of his body. No one knew what would happen if it was burned and refined for an extended period of time. In this way, the production line transformation could not be carried out for a while. It was more practical to pour milk. How could he waste it? Consume it? Luo Nan scratched his head. The pain in his toes had weakened a bit. He sat back on the bed and subconsciously flipped through his notebook. He wanted to find inspiration to solve this problem. But unfortunately, inspiration was a thing. It would always appear when there were too many restrictive conditions. In the end, it was hard for his imagination to solve practical problems. Chapter 373. His fingers paused, revealing 2 pieces of greenish-yellow paper sandwiched between the split pages of the notebook. They looked rough, but strangely glossy. This was a paper talisman given to him by Papercut. It was a top-quality product personally made by the famous psychic of the branch, Mr. Gao. Luo Nan used it to practice his soul strength activation techniques, strengthening the effects of his interference power. Last week at Ocean Sky Cloud City, the paper dolls he made had also made a contribution. Originally, this was a good method of pouring milk. Back then, Luo Nan had relied on this method to consume his excess soul strength and reduce the pressure on his body. But now that Luo Nan had comprehended the technique of coupling, the framework of the God gear and the body gear had taken shape. He no longer had a bottleneck in terms of interference power. He could use a fraction of his strength to achieve 100% of his previous effectiveness. He could stop using up energy. At present, he had not given up on this technique. He would always find time to practice it. Now, there were only 2 pieces of talisman paper left. There were more than 20 little paper men sandwiched between the 2 pieces of talisman paper. Little paper men fluttered in the air with a puff of air. They scattered on the bed and on the floor. But just as they touched the ground, they were like live monkeys. They grabbed the corners of Luo Nan's clothes and cuffs, fighting to be the first to jump back. Some simply climbed all the way to Luo Nan's head and shoulders, treating Luo Nan like a monkey mountain. What paper man? It was clearly a paper monkey. Luo Nan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his shoulders and shook his head, removing the group of paper monkeys. The heart monkey technique that Papercut had imparted to him was still too troublesome. Later on, Luo Nan wanted to learn the equestrian technique from Papercut. It was said that it had the power of armored horses in novels. It could carry heavy loads and soar over land. It could be said to have a miraculous effect. Luo Nan's anxious mood was alleviated quite a bit with this. Previously, he was just depressed by the recurrence of his illness and lost his composure. Now that he thought about it, he had the foundation of the coupling technique and was no longer in a dilemma. So what if his soul power increased again? If opening the eyes orifice wasn't enough, he could open the mouth and tongue orifice. If that didn't work, he could open the ears orifice, life orifice, and death orifice. Wouldn't it be balanced again? Patting his cheeks, he put away the paper monkeys and put them back into the book, taking the opportunity to organize his thoughts. In the end, he sent a message to Papercut through the hexear. Brother Papercut, do you have a big move for soul force activation? Big move? Papercut was chatting with someone in the tea house outside. He didn't react for a moment when he received the message. It's a very powerful move that consumes a lot of energy. Our method is like casting a spell, preparing a big move in advance. There's no need to panic. Papercut nearly choked when he heard Luo Nan's words. He apologized to the female friend across from him, got up, and went to a corner with no one around. He chuckled and responded, "My dear boss Luo, if I had such a big move, I would have dared to rush to Birang today. Do you believe me?" Luo Nan was a bit disappointed. Then there's nothing else. Let's not talk about whether or not such a move exists. The key is that there's a limit to how much the talisman paper can hold. Old Gao's paper talismans were the best of the best in the vicinity of Xia City, but when the interference force was increased to a certain degree, it would spontaneously combust. Therefore, a activation style like me has a life of support. I live my days on the spot. Boss Luo, you have the strength but nowhere to use it. You can switch to the control style. You have the talent for it. Papercut had an extremely good temperament. Even though Luo Nan had disturbed his date, he was very patient. He gave Luo Nan an explanation and even gave a suggestion. I told you before that the society has specialized combat machines. They may not be comparable to the Deep Blue Walkers in terms of both internal and external integration, but their power is still outstanding. Relying on your level of interference force after your epiphany, and then learning microcontrol and mechanical principles from old Zhai, you can play with this toy to the fullest. Luo Nan grunted twice. Papercut thought that Luo Nan was moved and felt that it was a bit of a pity. After all, there weren't many people like Luo Nan, who could cultivate the heart of the ape technique to spirituality in such a short amount of time. There were very few people interested in the activation style. Now that they lacked an up-and-coming talent, they inevitably became weaker. However, Papercut's mind was clear. He continued to laugh and said, "It just so happens that I have a flywheel arm in my collection. Although it hasn't been sharpened, it is the most basic of combat machines. If you want to get started, you can try it out. I'll bring it over when you have time." "Okay. If Brother Papercut isn't busy, then next Monday is fine." Though Luo Nan said this, he wasn't really interested in switching to the control style. This was because this style always made him think of the Deep Blue Walkers. Plus, Papercut's words made it even more awkward. Plus, he didn't really need a big move to protect himself. He just wanted to find a channel to pour milk. Luo Nan was disappointed. He was just about to say a few more polite words and hang up when Papercut became concerned about his recent situation. Headquarters has been quite well behaved lately. It seems that Deputy Secretary General Gong ate some bad luck. He went into closed-door training when he got back. "It's okay. The branch has taken good care of me." Then you suddenly want to hold back a big move. "Hey, Miss Yuan, what are you doing?" "I'm sorry. Something urgent suddenly came up. I need to go take care of it. Let's talk later." Okay. Later. The beautiful Miss Yuan didn't even have the patience to listen to Papercut's words even though she said they would talk later. She didn't even have the slightest intention of turning around. She swayed as she walked out of the tea house, quickly disappearing into the stream of people. She at least made a special trip to say something. Papercut sighed. He loosened his collar and walked back to his previous seat. He stretched and relaxed his body, and a smile appeared on his slightly plump face. "Brother Papercut?" Luo Nan couldn't see the situation over there, but he could feel that something not very harmonious had happened. Moreover, it was most likely related to his call. "Am I bothering you?" "It's nothing. It's nothing. The more beautiful a girl is, the harder it is to coax her. Besides, I just saw that she was pretty. I harbored evil intentions." "Where were we?" "Brother Papercut, since you have something to do, we can talk about it when we meet on Monday." "I said it's nothing. Waiter, give me an extra plate of snacks." Papercut's tone was relaxed. He continued to chat with Luo Nan with a beaming smile. "If you really feel guilty, then introduce me to a female student from Acumen College. She has to be over 20 years old. I'm afraid I'll turn into a beast if she's too young." Luo Nan stuttered a few times. Even he himself wasn't sure if he should agree or not. Papercut chewed on the snacks in his mouth as he spoke indistinctly. "Oh right. Let's talk about a big move. If you really want a big move, you don't need to look for it in the activation class. Open your mind. There are many things under the heavens that are suitable for you. For example, you can pay attention to an honor point mission from headquarters. The serial number is RT-8313. There might be a pleasant surprise there." "Headquarters?" Luo Nan was instinctively a bit afraid. Papercut could understand, so he eased Luo Nan's mind and said, "The mission is hung in headquarters, but its roots are in Arxia City. You'll know when you see it." The Hexier was able to completely achieve telepathic control in this sort of operation. A thought flashed through Luo Nan's mind as he and Papercut spoke, and the interface switched to the official mission release board of the Wilderness Explorers Society. Luo Nan locked onto the relevant information. Chapter 374. Luo Nan scratched his head in his bedroom. He felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. Papercut laughed mischievously in the tea house. "Do you see that? Her Majesty Empress Wu personally hung it up 3 years ago. The content is to collect soul force samples and analyze their basic properties and production principles. TSK, a big question." Luo Nan let out a sigh. No matter how big the hole in his brain was, he could only keep a respectful distance when encountering this sort of fundamental research that involved the essence of the problem. From this, one could see the foresight and boldness of an extraordinary. Right, 3 years ago, Her Majesty Empress Wu was not an extraordinary. However, Luo Nan didn't understand. What does this have to do with a big move? Hee, this is where Her Majesty the Martial Empress is awesome. She wanted to collect the soul force data of the entire world's ability users. Just like collecting fingerprints and DNA information, it was more or less a taboo. Even if the point reward was generous, not many people were willing to do it in the beginning, so the progress was rather slow. Later, she came up with an idea. You can look at Attachment 2, the payment agreement for information collection. Luo Nan didn't act according to Papercut's intentions. The familiar feeling grew more and more intense. He couldn't help but think hard. Where in the world have I heard this before? After all, his social circle was very narrow, and he didn't have many choices. Soon, he slapped his thigh. The Martial Emperor's secret technique, subdue the world by force. Papercut laughed again. Aha, you also know that it was Bamboo Pole who taught you. Yes, I have a rough idea. Luo Nan had indeed heard about this matter from the Notes on the Major Characters of the World course. As for why Luo Nan didn't think of Her Majesty Empress Wu for a time, it was because there were far too many marvelous deeds. Bamboo Pole, who taught the class, emphasized the description of many aspects of Luo Nan's character. Though this matter had a great impact, Bamboo Pole only spent a few minutes to explain it. He made the connection, the details, and so on. Then Bamboo Pole treated it as an extended assignment after class, letting Luo Nan do his own homework. Luo Nan was pressed for time, so he didn't really get involved. He passed it by mistake. At present, he only knew that in this event that shook the inner world, Her Majesty the Martial Empress had displayed her inconceivable boldness. On the mission issuance interface, she had publicly imparted an astonishing attack technique, which had instantly ignited the entire inner world. The current research on supernatural powers was still in its early stages, and some of the advanced research results had yet to be disseminated. Most of the ability users in this world were still in an instinctive state of ignorance about how to use their own abilities. Her Majesty Empress Wu grasped the minds of these people, publicizing a profound technique that was extremely suitable for the awakened level. Its allure instantly crushed most of the people's defenses. For a time, cultivating the Martial Emperor's secret technique became common practice. Not to mention the awakened, even the higher-level architects and transcendents practiced and researched it. From that moment on, Her Majesty Empress Wu's fame truly spread throughout the world. Papercut helped Luo Nan enrich the details. Her Majesty Empress Wu spent a large sum of money to build a special data collection network before the release of the Dripping Sword's secret technique. She borrowed the East Wind and spent a mere 2 years to collect over 40,000 effective samples of ability users of all levels. There was a gap of a year in between. At the beginning of this year, she released a technique suitable for architects, or B-rank power users. At present, the number of valid samples has not been calculated, but it should not be too little. I estimate that there should be at least 300 to 500 samples. The number of B-class experts might seem small, but considering the number of B-class experts, the ratio was quite high. This is the 3rd year. Her Majesty Empress Wu has already advanced to become an extraordinary. We are all guessing that this year or next year, it is very likely that she will bring out an even higher level technique. Oh, the extraordinary level. How magnanimous. Luo Nan had to admire her. Yeah. Although this sort of technique became a common commodity once it was released on the internet, it's still quite good to have a technique at your disposal. The more Papercut thought about it, the more reliable he felt it was. Next, he did his best to recommend, Her Majesty Empress Wu's technique is famous for being reliant on control. The same dripping sword can be used by one person to exterminate a powerful enemy like slaughtering a dog, while the other person can't even kill a chicken. There are situations like this. Your spirit enhancement is in the precision direction. I am very confident in your control. Dripping sword. Luo Nan finally opened attachment 2. He looked at the name of the technique displayed inside and muttered to himself for a time. You should learn it first. Her Majesty Empress Wu's techniques are more inclined towards the mental side. The requirements for the fleshly body aren't too high. It just so happens to suit you. I've learned the dripping sword. It really is out of the ordinary. At the very least, it has unexpected effects. As he spoke, Papercut sent over a file through the hexaear. Her Majesty Empress Wu personally wrote the lecture notes for last year's intermediate training class. It has to do with the dripping sword. The introduction is extremely detailed. There are also on-the-spot demonstrations and demonstrations during the lecture. This is a treatment that only our Xia City branch can enjoy. Even a year later, we can sell it for tens of thousands of dollars to the outside world. There are also notes I made. You can take a look. After all, my talent in this field is limited. Thank you, Brother Papercut. Luo Nan knew that these class notes were very secretive things. For Papercut to be able to take them out showed his trust in Luo Nan. Papercut didn't care. This is nothing. I've seen your recent progress. Secretary He's arrangement of classes will involve this step as well. I'm just giving you special treatment ahead of time. Plus, I owe you a favor for the matter with old Zhai. Worker Zhai? Old Zhai is a capable person, but his talent in cultivation is far too lacking. He is always a bit away from awakening, so he can't enjoy some resources. Him being your teacher can be counted in honor points. If you exchange it for resources, your chances of success will increase. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not. You can at least give him a bit of comfort. Luo Nan didn't agree with this, saying, "You can't say it like that. Worker Zhai gave me supplementary lessons. He taught me even more. I still need to thank you, Brother Papercut, for finding me such a good teacher." Tisk, it's so sour. Let's not flatter each other. I'll call old Zhai out one day, and everyone can have a good meal. Okay. Luo Nan made a mental note of this. In this way, he would have 2 rounds with Papercut. It didn't matter, but introducing a female student. What a headache. Luo Nan's mind cleared up just as he was about to end the call. He had nearly forgotten his original intention of pouring milk. He mulled over Papercut's description of the dripping sword. It didn't seem like a high-energy consumption skill. Luo Nan hurriedly asked, "What about the Birank technique? Do you have the lecture notes? It's suitable for architects. It's called the heart-searing blade. It's said to be extremely sharp, but I don't recommend that you come into contact with it right now." Papercut downed his already cold tea in one gulp. He began to earnestly lecture Luo Nan. "Nanster, there are indeed quite a few people who view you as a Birank power, but you're still lacking a bit, right? Take a look at the dripping sword first. This technique is extremely amazing. It also highlights the characteristics of Her Majesty Empress Wu's technique. If you feel that you can use it freely, then take a step further, okay? I know. I just want to gather some information in advance." Though Luo Nan said this, he still felt weak in his heart. Chapter 375. Sister Yuan. Luo Nan grew more and more diffident. This sort of action of biting off more than one could chew would most likely not receive Yuan's support. Papercut added, however, if it involves personal understanding and experience, it would be best to find someone who was present at the time of the lecture. It would be even better to impart the teachings of their hearts. There were only a few B-class experts in the branch, and even fewer in the spiritual type. Old Yu, Horned Demon, Old Gao, Mr. Bai. He read out a string of names. Luo Nan found the names familiar. Aren't these the psychics of Xia City? Old Man Yu was one of the Iron Triangle of Xia City. He was known alongside Ouyang Chen and Her Majesty Empress Wu. The centaur was said to be an adventurous madman with a tendency to self-destruct. He wandered in the wilderness every day, looking for excitement. Old Gao was the creator of the paper talisman in Luo Nan's hand. He was a Taoist with an inheritance, and he was half a disciple of Old Yu. As for Mr. Bai, Luo Nan was even more familiar with him. They had fought side by side before, and Mr. Bai had even given Luo Nan a diagnosis and treatment. His daughter was Bai Xinyan, the mysterious medical doctor with a strange stance. He suddenly discovered that the psychics of Xia City were quite peculiar. Excluding Luo Nan, who was half a psychic, there were a total of 4 psychics. Perhaps the ratio wasn't high when compared to over 1,000 ability users, but all of them were of the architect rank. They were B-rank powerhouses. In the entire Xia City branch, how many powerhouses were there at B rank or higher? There were a total of 14 people on record, which was already one of the best out of the 88 branches in the world. Among them, shamans accounted for nearly a third of them, which was very impressive. Luo Nan was a bit distracted, and Papercut pulled him back. I can help you, ask old Gao. It's just that this fellow is a bit unscrupulous. He might try to rip you off. Sweat, you used to have a large supply of talisman paper, how many of them were taken advantage of? Luo Nan suddenly felt that he really should find an opportunity to give thanks to the teachers who taught him his skills. Luo Nan didn't want Papercut to return to this matter. He thought for a bit and said, maybe we can look for Mr. Bai. The old man seemed to have a good temperament and character. He should be easier to talk to than the profiteer, Mr. Gao. That's right, you've been treated by White Salt for such a long time, so it can be considered a bit of fate. He'll definitely pay attention to you, just don't take the initiative to mention it. I know. Luo Nan understood tacitly. It wasn't news that the father and daughter of the Bai family didn't get along. Wait, why does it sound like you want me to find someone? Luo Nan opened his mouth, but he was speechless. It was his own business, so of course he had to do it himself. However, with his otaku personality, he would feel great pressure even if he took the initiative to contact someone, let alone ask for help. After all, Mr. White was still his senior, and he wasn't that familiar with him. In any case, Luo Nan could no longer let Papercut do this for him. He could only grit his teeth and agree. It was also at this moment that he suddenly thought of something. If every time he went into seclusion to cultivate, he would have to lose control and spend a lot of energy to clean up after himself. Would it be worth it? Mrs. Luo Shuqing was a bit baffled during breakfast the next morning. She kept feeling that something was off with Luo Nan. In the end, he couldn't help but ask, what are you so conflicted about? Oh. Luo Nan tightly stuffed a large amount of meat into his mouth. When he raised his head, he had an innocent expression on his face. Your eyebrows are all knotted, and you still say you're not conflicted? Luo Nan swallowed the slice of meat with great difficulty. He continued to play dumb. Are you conflicted? Oh, my forehead is fighting with the marginal lobes. In the end, Mrs. Luo Shuqing's attainments in psychology were decent. She went around in circles and finally understood. In psychology, the prefrontal cortex represented rationality and self-control, while the marginal lobes represented impulsive emotions. It could also be understood as the struggle between long-term benefits and short-term benefits. Luo Nan was just speaking carelessly, and he shivered. However, his words did contain some true emotions. He didn't go looking for Mr. Bai last night. The reason was that he wasn't familiar with Mr. Bai. It was too late, and he was afraid of disturbing Mr. Bai's rest. To put it bluntly, his otaku cancer flared up. He displayed a fear of interpersonal relationships. He dragged it out as long as he could. He knew how to kill someone he was familiar with, and in the end, he went looking for Secretary He. He learned that the branch's database did indeed have a recording of the high-level seminar back then. However, Luo Nan wasn't able to get his hands on it. He Yuan warned him very bluntly not to bite off more than he could chew. The B-rank technique, Heart Incineration Blade, involved too many elements. Many of them were knowledge unique to architects. Without a solid foundation, forcefully practicing was no good. Essentially speaking, Luo Nan hadn't even reached the standard of an awakened due to the imbalance between his body and soul. This was a problem with the standard. It wouldn't change just because his combat strength was superb. A missile that could explode at any time was indeed more frightening and destructive than a refined rifle. However, the control power needed to be looked at the other way around. Last night, Luo Nan even asked how to pour the milk. Oh no, he asked how to use his ultimate move. In the end, Yuan saw through his worsening condition of the imbalance between his body and soul. Only after tossing and turning for a while did he avoid the pain of inspection. He didn't get any results in his training that night. It was hard for Luo Nan to avoid feeling emotional. However, he had forgotten that his aunt had been paranoid these past 2 days. She was worried that Luo Nan had stepped into some domain. Luo Shuqing immediately became nervous when he heard his vague and suggestive words. Did that firm come to recruit you again? Luo Nan slapped himself in the face in his mind and cursed his foul mouth. He rushed to ease Luo Shuqing's mind. Nope. I haven't contacted them for the past 2 days. They were just speaking carelessly. It would have been better if he didn't explain. The more he explained, the more Luo Shuqing became suspicious. She put down her bowl and chopsticks, wanting to understand the situation in depth. At this time, Mo Haihang, who was swiping at the table and reading the newspaper, suddenly jumped out with a sentence. Actually, if there's no danger, you can give it a try. Young people are just trial and error. Only by making mistakes can you gather effective information. He brought out the trial and error theory again, and this time he took it a step further. You can go to their firm and try it out. See if it suits your heart. If you want to do it, then draft up a contract and bring it back for your aunt to help examine it. You're in high school now. Financial independence can be put on the agenda. Luo Shuqing turned to glare angrily at her husband, but she soon understood something. She furrowed her brows in silence. There was one more person who was at a loss. They clearly wanted to get to the bottom of things. Luo Nan knew long ago that his aunt and uncle were worried about the direction of the so-called trial and error theory. He could see through them with a single glance. He couldn't help but feel even more depressed. He groaned in his mind, it's all a misunderstanding. He began to ponder whether or not he should ask Zhang Yingying for help. She should set up a trap and play a two-man show to calm the hearts of these two elders. Breakfast ended hastily amidst the confusion and probing. Today was Sunday, November 4, 2096. The accidental injury in the morning seemed to have given a bad start to the day's schedule. Luo Nan's aunt and uncle, as well as Mo Yen, went out to do their own things after breakfast. Luo Nan continued to stay at home, carelessly observing the star atlas of the format pyramid. He was intimidated by the continuously increasing water level of the vast ocean of icebergs. He dejectedly withdrew from the fixed space, holding his head in distress. He couldn't delve any deeper into the homework related to formatting theory before he found a suitable channel to pour milk. Even the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger division technique personally taught by the gym master couldn't be considered due to too many connections. As for the internal refinement technique of the 9 orifices and 6 roots, Luo Nan had already mastered it during the morning class. There was no need to superfluously paint a snake with legs. Luo Nan had been at home for an entire day. He needed to do something, right? Luo Nan rolled around on his bed twice. In the end, he had no other choice but to follow Papercut's suggestion. He opened up the mission posting page for soul strength information gathering and flipped through the dripping sword teaching materials that Papercut had sent over. He wanted to see if he could discover anything interesting from it. For the fastest and most error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 376. It had to be said that Luo Nan's mood was quite high right now. Most of his thoughts last night were on the heart-searing blade, the legendary secret technique of pouring milk. He only skimmed a few glances at the Sirang technique, the dripping sword. He did not sink his heart into it. He only knew that this technique mainly condensed water vapor out of thin air to attack the enemy's weak points. It was a bit like the magicians in fantasy novels, but the sound and light effects were inferior. Right now, Luo Nan wanted to go deep into contact with this technique. He first looked at the original recording on Annex 2 of Headquarters RT-8313 mission. Speaking up to this point, he actually wanted to look at Annex 3 yesterday, but he did not have the authority to read it. He could only look at the summary and the like. Only ability users at the architect rank or above could see the full picture. How infuriating. Luo Nan grinned as he waited for the network to buffer. The demonstration recording on the annex used the reality level of video and audio storage specifications. Its volume was enormous. Even with the special network form of the hexaear, a period of time was needed for smooth playback. The volume specification corresponded with its value. After all, this was a teaching demonstration for all ability users in the world, and it was done by Her Majesty Empress Wu herself. According to the suggestion of the hexaear's AI assistant, Luo Nan chose the reality mode with the best results. This was the function of the simulator on the 4th level of the psychic wave network. Right now, Luo Nan had already solved the problem of interference power. He could use the related functions without any pressure. He closed his eyes. After the darkness naturally descended, gentle light slowly seeped in. The light gradually deepened and changed. In the end, it formed a scene of interweaving gray and dark red. There were also intersecting noises, wind pressure, the choking smell of the earth, and even the dry sensation of his skin entering at the same time. He was instantly brought to the vast and spacious wilderness. Luo Nan was already used to such simulation guidance. He just felt that the simulator of the psychic wave network was a bit more exquisite than the burner version of Frost River reality. Right now, he was at the entry level of the 9 orifices and 6 roots technique. The stimulation of these nerve cells caused his internal organs, fascia, skin, and flesh to react instinctively. He needed to give himself another hint to make up for the disparity in perception between his mind and fleshly body. Luo Nan raised his head to look into the distance. Right now, he was at the top of a hill. This was the highest point relative to the surrounding environment. The dark red earth beneath their feet was cracked layer by layer, extending endlessly towards the horizon. This was, without a doubt, the wilderness. In the next second, Luo Nan's attention was involuntarily drawn by the bright, sharp, and valiant slender figure in front of him. He suddenly realized who was the main character in this world. Her Majesty Martial Empress. For the time being, only the silhouette of Her Majesty Empress Wu could be seen. She was wearing a tailored hunting suit that was tight at the waist. It was dark red in color and paired with brown boots, which highlighted her long legs and matched her slender figure. What was more eye-catching was the lightweight electromagnetic rifle slung across her shoulder. The body of the rifle was cut off by a simple and low-profile ponytail, but it still reminded everyone that this was a dangerous wasteland. This outfit was similar to the color of the wasteland and could also serve as camouflage. It looked more professional, but it also had a wonderful sense of fashion, forming a very wonderful balance. Well, any man would find similar reasons when facing a stunning beauty. To Her Majesty Empress Wu, that rifle was no different from a bag in a fashionable woman's hand. They were both plastic arts. Luo Nan's imagination ran wild as he tried to move about in reality. The enormous video and audio storage format of reality should have left enough space for interaction. But Her Majesty Empress Wu's image did not respond. Could it be that there were no relevant interaction resources stored? Just as Luo Nan's thoughts spun, Her Majesty Empress Wu suddenly turned around. Her gorgeous, bright, and beautiful face appeared without reservation. It was within Luo Nan's breathing range. Luo Nan actually took a step back. Of course Luo Nan recognized Her Majesty Empress Wu. Though he had never formally met her, Bamboo Pole's notes on the most important people of the world course had photos, videos, and other video materials. Especially for a stunning beauty like Her Majesty Empress Wu. All kinds of materials were even more complete. Luo Nan's impression of Her Majesty Empress Wu was, of course, extremely beautiful. She especially loved to smile. In all kinds of video materials, Her Majesty Empress Wu always revealed a reserved, unrestrained, cordial, mocking, or fierce smile. Her smile infused the already bright and gorgeous image with an even more vivid color. Luo Nan only believed that Bamboo Pole had specially chosen materials during the class. Only later did he find out that Her Majesty Empress Wu had left behind all the video materials ever since she became famous. Whether it was photos or videos, she had never left behind any expressionless moments. Luo Nan felt that it was interesting at first, but it made his hair stand on end when he thought about it. Cough, these were Bamboo Pole's original words. At the time, Bamboo Pole spoke as a footnote to Her Majesty Empress Wu's temperamental personality. It left an incomparably deep impression on Luo Nan. Her Majesty Empress Wu in the reality recording was obviously smiling. It was the kind of professional smile that made her seem like a competent host. Oh, no. She was more like a tour guide. In fact, this was a reality experience of travel and adventure. With the support of reality technology, those bold characters could completely greet Her Majesty Empress Wu before them. They could shake hands. They could even say a few flowery words. There shouldn't be any problems. However, Luo Nan shrunk back. He shrunk back in great embarrassment. The beautiful face that was so close at hand gave him a tremendous pressure. Was it an incurable outbreak of otaku cancer? Luo Nan was willing to believe that it was Bamboo Pole's explanation that day that left a shadow in his heart. It was needless to say that Her Majesty Empress Wu was famous for her beauty in her early years. Her appearance could be said to be ostentatiously beautiful. Her facial features were completely flawless, but there was always something out of line between her brows and eyes. Bamboo Pole, who had seen countless beauties, had this to say: this so-called out of line was actually a kind of oppressive force. People could feel an unquestionable dominant force from Her Majesty Empress Wu's smile from time to time. She was charming, and you would be infatuated. She was gentle, and you would be satisfied. She was fierce, and you would tremble. She was callous, and you would be fearful. Any high-level intelligent life form had a relatively clear self-awareness. Their thinking instinctively revolved around themselves. No one wanted to become someone else's prey. But Her Majesty Empress Wu's out-of-line beauty, supported by her boldness, transformed into a sharp weapon that pointed at the weakest part of the human heart. Perhaps Luo Nan was scaring himself. Right now, Luo Nan had a trembling feeling of facing a sharp blade. He only relaxed a bit when he pulled some distance away. Such a reaction hurt Luo Nan's self-esteem. What the hell? If I'm like this when I see a virtual image, won't I immediately kneel when I see the real person? He slapped his cheeks. A wave of rebellious psychology, a common trait at his age, stirred restlessly. He really wanted to use his interactive function to do something, to retaliate. Chapter 377. Our target has arrived. Her Majesty Empress Wu's side profile had slightly parted bangs and a low, fluffy ponytail style. She embellished a full sense of elegance, but the impact was reduced a bit. Compared to her breathtaking appearance, Her Majesty Empress Wu's voice was a bit calmer. It was a bit deeper, and she spoke a bit slower. Her enunciation was especially clear, and her tone fluctuated vividly. Combined with her smile, it made one wonder if there was some hidden meaning behind her words. Luo Nan felt even more nervous. He heaved a sigh of relief and turned his head to look at the foot of the hill. An ugly hairless monster had just appeared. Its shoulder height was definitely more than 2 meters, its body was fat, and it had long fangs. It was shaking its layers of thick skin and flesh as it silently rushed up. It was less than 50 meters away from them. The scene suddenly tensed up. Her Majesty Empress Wu explained unhurriedly, "This is a pleated wild boar. It's a low-level mutant commonly seen in the wilderness. It has practically no research value, but its skin is thick and its blood is long. Its impact force is extraordinary as well. When it's in a group, it's quite irritating." Her Majesty Empress Wu removed the portable electromagnetic rifle from her shoulder as she spoke. She didn't even take aim. She opened fire with one hand, confident and at ease. The metal bullet accurately struck the head of the pleated wild boar, the thinnest part of its skin. It embedded itself deeply, but soon the flesh squirmed and the bullet fell off. Blood flowed like a fountain, smearing its face. The pleated wild boar was a bit dizzy, but it shook its head. It still charged forward courageously, fully verifying the evaluation of its skin being thick and blood being long. Her Majesty Empress Wu's figure didn't move. She continued with a smile, pure physical impact isn't that effective. The firearms of the military require a certain degree of concentrated fire in order to be effective. However, as ability users, we can do this. The pleated wild boar's angry eye socket burst with blood just as her voice fell. This enormous mutant let out an extremely disproportionate shriek from its throat. Its body staggered, and it nearly slipped. Luo Nan looked at its left eye socket. A bloody hole had exploded there. It was badly mangled, and one eye was already blind. Luo Nan was baffled. What just happened? He didn't see Her Majesty Empress Wu make any unnecessary movements. The wild boar, which had lost one eye, became extremely manic. Even if there was a problem with the correct location, the speed of the galloping was even faster. It was at this time that an excellent video clip appeared next to Luo Nan in the form of an AR. It replayed the moment just now in slow motion, helping a rookie like Luo Nan to reconstruct the process. Her Majesty Empress Wu gave a synchronized explanation. The virtual screen clearly showed that when the pleated skin wild boar charged, translucent water droplets condensed in midair and pierced through the pupils, causing the fragile eyeballs to explode, but that was all. Her Majesty Empress Wu also said, "I just unleashed a dripping sword, but the effect wasn't too good. The reason why I'm doing this is to show everyone one thing: in practical applications, you shouldn't overestimate its lethality. After all, this is only an awakened level technique. If you don't use it properly, it will make the situation worse." It sounded very reasonable, but was it really not because of a mistake? Luo Nan had yet to walk out from the shadow of losing face. He couldn't help harboring a subtle thought and made malicious guesses. But in the next second, the other eyeball of the pleated wild boar, which was still 20 meters away, exploded. The situation seemed to be similar to last time. The pleated wild boar roared once more, but its roar was cut off halfway. Its thick and sturdy body lost its balance. It simply fell to the ground and slid forward. It lost all kinetic energy when it was around 5 meters away from Her Majesty Empress Wu. All that was left was the instinctive twitching of its limbs. Luo Nan gaped. This time he really didn't understand where the problem lay. At this time, Her Majesty Empress Wu took 2 steps forward. She was like a field researcher. She knelt on one knee next to the pleated wild boar, allowing the dry red earth to stick to her hunting clothes. Then, her slender fingers swiped through the air, and the head of the pleated wild boar that was as hard as iron was cut apart. It was only this inhuman action that made people remember her identity as an extraordinary. Oh, she wasn't one 3 years ago. Luo Nan didn't know how many times he had been stumped by this train of thought. The dissection scene was very bloody, but it helped to restore the truth. It was as if Luo Nan was at the scene. He took 2 steps forward and saw that the brain of the pleated wild boar had completely turned into a paste. Forget a wild boar, even a giant elephant would be cleanly wiped out by this kind of damage. But why was the effect so different between the 2 times? Could it be that she was cheating? Luo Nan sank into malicious conjectures, finding it hard to extricate himself. On the other side, Her Majesty Empress Wu had already given the answer. In terms of destructive power, this is the effect of the water droplet impact, which is enhanced by both sharpening and exploding. And in order to control it to penetrate the eye and enter the brain, there is also the enhancement of guidance. Her Majesty Empress Wu smiled as she explained the key points of this attack technique. As mentioned before, the dripping sword was called a sword, but it was actually an attack technique that interfered with the material plane of the mind. The principle was to use soul strength to form a special circuit, to fully do work, to absorb the water molecules in the atmosphere, to achieve a series of blessings such as sharpening, exploding, amplification, acceleration, guidance, and so on. It was a technique that killed the enemy in an instant. The core circuit structure of the dripping sword technique was known as the condensation ring. Only through this structure could water molecules be rapidly gathered. And on this basis, various effects such as sharpening, amplification, exploding, and so on could be realized. For this reason, soul strength needed to be close to the material plane. It was sculpted and shaped. It didn't matter if it was rough, and it didn't matter if it couldn't be maintained for a long time. The key point was the suddenness and explosive power of the instantaneous shape. It's not easy to absorb water from thin air, and it will delay the battle. Therefore, the most ideal way to use it is through the enemy's eyes, mouth, and other places that are more moist. It is possible to compress the gathering time as much as possible, using food to feed the enemy, to achieve an instantaneous effect. Her Majesty Empress Wu's attitude was candid. She didn't hide the shortcomings of this technique when it was used in actual combat. I'll repeat once more. Pure beads of water have no lethality. It must possess the 5 blessings of sharpening, amplification, acceleration, explosion, and guidance. Only then will it be meaningful. And these 6 structures are all independent. Aside from the condensation ring being the core step, the other effects will need to be increased or decreased according to specific circumstances. For this reason, one must maintain a high degree of calmness and clear-headedness in actual combat when using this technique. Unfortunately, quite a few people aren't able to do this. It has nothing to do with talent. It's just a matter of character. Wasn't character also a part of talent? Luo Nan really wanted to use the root receptacle, root nature, and root trigger division technique he just learned to fight against Her Majesty Empress Wu. Unfortunately, this was meaningless. Her Majesty Empress Wu explained the 6 structural circuits one by one, including the condensation ring. She combined this with the magnified model on the virtual screen and a live demonstration. She explained the profound in simple terms and was very clear and easy to understand. The clarity of the reality level combined with the powerful playback function of the hexa-ear created an astonishing effect. Aside from theory, Her Majesty Empress Wu condensed the structural circuits in a casual manner. Even if she deliberately made them visible for the sake of demonstration, the fluctuations and changes of soul strength could still be sensed by others. This was not easy at all. No wonder the volume of the video file was enormous. How many resources would be consumed to reproduce such details? And there was certainly the specialized technology of the inner world inside. Her Majesty Empress Wu, who was in the reality realm, took the opportunity to sell her personal goods. The current application techniques of the mental side are the art of structure. Ability users fully utilize the plasticity of soul strength to form functional structures with interference power. Then they can influence and control more effective material components to realize the extraordinary effect of the mind distorting reality. Luo Nan nodded over and over as he listened. He thought of the Wraith sign. The human-faced arachnid's offensive methods were often realized through complex and special structures. It was just that this fellow had no material foundation at all. It could only create shadows on the mental plane. There was also the configuration that Jack spoke of. It was the operational structure of energy and information. It manifested itself extremely clearly on the body of a burner. Her Majesty Empress Wu even mentioned the high-end application standards of the dripping sword on the topic of the art of structure. According to her, it was not difficult to make the water droplet explode. What was difficult was to condense it into a pellet, to be as sharp as a blade, to strike a vital point without injuring oneself. However, the sculpting and shaping of the condensation ring needed to be extremely precise in order to realize this point. The structure was stable, and it consumed too much mental energy. It was not economical enough, so there was no need to criticize her for seeking perfection. The consumption was too great. It was not economical enough? Luo Nan was very sensitive to consumption right now. His ears immediately perked up. Could it be that this small water droplet, which appeared and exploded in an instant, could consume a large amount of soul strength? His interest rose by several levels in an instant. Unfortunately, Her Majesty Empress Wu did not demonstrate this so-called high-end technique. This caused Luo Nan's malicious conjecture to erupt once more. Could it be that you couldn't do it back then? The video ended, but Luo Nan was still unsatisfied. He had yet to look at the lecture notes that Papercut sent over. Just by starting with Her Majesty Empress Wu's explanation, Luo Nan already had his own understanding. Control, precision and improvisation were the core of the dripping sword technique, but the most basic thing was still precision. The basic requirement was to sculpt the relevant structure on the millimeter scale. A rough mold would be ineffective. Precision was the best. Luo Nan was a precision-oriented, mentally enhanced user. His mental senses were first-rate acuity, and he had a basic understanding of configurations. He had an enormous advantage in this aspect. Papercut was right. This technique seemed to have been specially prepared for him. Oh, that's right. He could also be considered an artist. Structural art, in a certain sense, could also be considered a plastic art. Luo Nan temporarily tossed his desire for the heart incineration blade beyond the highest heavens. He couldn't help but want to put this Sirank technique into practice. Plus, he was ambitious. He wanted to come from a higher place. He disdained that kind of short-term, unstable structure. If he was going to use it, he would use the most sophisticated kind. Luo Nan immediately followed Her Majesty Empress Wu's suggestion. He turned on the air humidifier in the room, increasing the moisture content in the air. He followed Papercut's explanation step by step, attempting to sculpt the structure with his sole strength. On one hand, Luo Nan was ambitious. On the other hand, he had a cautious temperament. He didn't want to eat a fatty in one bite. He wanted to completely grasp the relatively complex overall structure of the dripping sword. Instead, he temporarily ignored the 5 types of amplification structures. He stared at the condensation ring with all his attention. This structural circuit was the beginning and foundation of the mental interfering with the material plane. If he didn't thoroughly understand it, he wouldn't be able to talk about the rest. From the magnified microscopic model, the structure of the condensation ring was more like a smooth donut. The center was empty, and the overall rules weren't complicated. But many people would simply kneel if they wanted to accurately depict the three-dimensional curved structure of the inner and outer rings with sole strength. This was the difficulty that Her Majesty Empress Wu emphasized. However, Luo Nan only failed twice in the gradually damp bedroom air. He was able to make the relevant structure appear in the void. The diameter of this condensation ring was only 0.02 millimeters. Just this one move was enough to crush the vast majority of awakened. Of course, the sculpting effort was a bit more in the beginning. According to the timer of the hexayear and the time it took for the water molecules to gather and take shape, it was already close to 10 seconds. As for the structure of the condensation ring itself, it was hard to avoid roughness. The time it took for the water droplet to take shape after forming was pitifully low compared to the time it took to gather. It was only 0.4 seconds. It was completely meaningless in combat. But what was that phrase again? Practice makes perfect. Compared to the energy and information operating structure of the human-faced arachnid, doing this kind of work, aside from being smaller in size, was the same as drawing a more complex circle. If one didn't care about the precision and details, then it really wasn't a big deal. Luo Nan was a bit dissatisfied with this. Who said that the consumption was great? But this was indeed convenient for large amounts of practice. Once one was done, there was no need to worry about it anymore. It could gather water molecules on its own and then break apart. Luo Nan only cared about the next one and continued to make adjustments. He did it every 3 to 5 seconds. He did it 20 times in a minute. Soon, he became familiar with the structure of the condensation ring. He could compress the majority of the condensation ring's shape to 2 to 3 seconds. He did it 30 times in a minute. 30 repetitions in a minute, and most of them were substandard products. It was hard to be effective. Was it boring? Was it frustrating? Perhaps some people felt that it was boring and frustrating, but Luo Nan didn't think so. Everything depended on the details. When he learned to sketch and sketch, he relied on large amounts of practice to slowly grind them out. When he sketched the outline, it seemed as if he was drawing lines that were all the same. It was repetitive and tedious, but in reality, his hand could clearly sense whether it was stiff or soft, rough or exquisite. A person's aesthetic sense could be accurately grasped, and the corresponding sense of accomplishment would inevitably follow. Yes, only when one's thinking was exquisite could one touch upon a more subtle level. One could capture a little change, a little progress, and the sense of accomplishment. It was as Her Majesty Empress Wu had said. The dripping sword technique was a kind of structural art. A slight transformation was a kind of plastic art. Luo Nan's perception and aesthetic sense could be judged. Therefore, Luo Nan could borrow his previous successful experience to know what sort of standard he needed to reach. He was mentally prepared for the dry and tedious practice in the early stages. The distance wasn't too far. His progress could be seen. Why not complete it in a spurt of energy? Luo Nan really did treat it as a painting. He followed the routine from back in the day. After a short period of brainless practice, he no longer casually used his thoughts to shape. Instead, he used his brain. He compared it with Her Majesty Empress Wu's example, carefully imitating and correcting it. He first slowed down. After gaining some understanding, he began to speed up. Then he slowed down again. Then he sped up again. In the end, he sped up all the way. Luo Nan forgot how many times he practiced. In the beginning, he recorded it through the hexaear, but how could he care about it later on? Around 2 hours passed, and it was almost time for lunch. Luo Nan's mind suddenly lit up. The brush and carving knife of his soul strength were extraordinarily smooth and quick. He practically couldn't feel the process of carving. A strand of thought was like a seal. It firmly pressed down, and the condensation ring was engraved on the boundary between the mental and material planes. When he was distracted and lost control of his mind, the structure of the water droplets became chaotic and exploded, turning into a thick mist. That was about it. Luo Nan shook his head and sighed. He roughly tidied himself up, lifted his blanket, and went to the balcony. Just as he took 2 steps forward, a glint of water flashed in the corner of his eyes. It was a water droplet that had just formed. Oh, this of time of time. Luo Nan hugged the blanket and stared at the beads of water. He was sure that all the water droplets had exploded, and it was definitely true. Perhaps it was because Luo Nan's feeling was on point, but the final structure of the condensation ring that Luo Nan sculpted was the most perfect in terms of shape. Its precision reached a certain standard. After a period of turbulence, the water that had gathered completely dispersed, but the basic structure of the condensation ring did not explode like other rings of the same kind. Instead, it tenaciously preserved itself. Of time. Luo Nan's attention was temporarily focused on this bead of water. Not much of the consumption. Strands. Endless. Perhaps for other mentally enhanced users, long periods of time would be a bit of pressure. But Luo Nan's soul strength was affected by the high output of the format pyramid production line. Every second of progress was several times that of this kind of consumption. It didn't hurt nor itch. If this was called consumption, then the whole world was in an economic crisis. Luo Nan grinned. Since it involved the relevant situation, he instinctively used introspection to look at the state of his god gear. Just as he cut into the past, his thoughts suddenly froze on the spot. Dropped? It was completely different from what he imagined. The water level of the vast ocean of icebergs, which was already overflowing, had actually dropped by a chunk for some unknown reason. It was even lower than yesterday's normal state. With such an astonishing drop, it was no wonder that he felt a sense of exhaustion. Luo Nan was a bit stupefied. This didn't make sense. The consumption of the condensation ring needed to be multiplied by 1,000 to 10,000 times in order to achieve this sort of effect. Luo Nan subconsciously hugged the quilt to his chest. The slight moisture on it reminded him of something. The room had just been sprinkled with water mist. He thought about it. A single condensation ring obviously didn't consume much. But if several hundred condensation rings existed at the same time, then several thousand would be produced in succession, and the process would continue without end. This consumption could no longer be ignored. It was common knowledge that multiple missions consumed a lot of resources. It was possible for this kind of consumption to exceed the output of the format pyramid production line for a period of time. In other words, Luo Nan's large amount of practice had turned into actual milk pouring as several hundred water droplets exploded. He poured the excess soul strength into the river. No, there was still a scene of milk pouring. But what was this? Atomization? Evaporation? Sublimation? Luo Nan laughed bitterly at first, but then he laughed heartily. He even tossed the damp quilt up in celebration. Even though the input and output were completely disproportionate, and the effect couldn't be said to be a permanent cure, it was still a pleasant surprise to be able to resolve a threat. Luo Nan never imagined that the matter would be resolved so easily when his symptoms relapsed. Moreover, he even obtained a rather effective emergency measure. The pressure was immediately swept clean. This feeling of being able to advance and retreat freely was too refreshing. Luo Nan's mood became very good. He cast his gaze toward the water droplet, and it was as if he was looking at a pearl. There should be a certain upper limit to the water vapor that the condensation ring could gather. The growth of the water droplet's volume had already stagnated. In the end, it was only the size of half a pinky finger, with a diameter of approximately 1 centimeter. It wasn't exactly eye-catching, but it was quite eye-catching when refracting light. Luo Nan thought for a moment. He wasn't going to disperse the water droplet for now. He wanted to see how long it could last and how its overall consumption was. He would certainly have to try out the 5 auxiliary structures in a bit. He just happened to use the core condensation ring as a base. Luo Nan hastily hung the quilt on the balcony and went downstairs to eat. The water droplet spun around his body. It was quite spiritual. The water droplet did not have the support of the heart ape technique. Instead, it was tightly linked with his soul strength. It was like an extension of his limbs. As time passed, the power of habit displayed more and more astonishing effects. When one was used to something, one would unconsciously ignore it. Luo Nan temporarily forgot about the water droplet beside him. He fought with the AI butler's anti-human nutritious meal. There was nothing else on this table, but the function of filling one's stomach was complete. Luo Nan didn't stay idle as he ate in large mouthfuls. He originally wanted to flip through the handouts and notes that Papercut had sent over, but after some thought, he continued to flip through the mission posting page. There was nothing else on Her Majesty Empress Wu's posting interface. However, the discussion area below, the traditional message page, had 20 messages that filled a page. Right now, there were a terrifying number of over 18,000 pages. There were only a few awakened in the entire world. Luo Nan remembered Zhang Yingying saying that there were less than 70,000 registered awakened in the entire world. This meant that every awakened had posted at least 5 times in the discussion area. Even though this was the accumulation of 3 years, there were certainly quite a few quarreling and spiteful messages within. But from the perspective of the inner world, this was truly a national event. The influence of the world subjugation event could be seen at a glance. The messages in the reply area were arranged in reverse order by default. The newest message was at the very top. It was from 10 minutes ago, and the content was, a daily meal. Luo Nan traced back an hour. There were 2 more messages, indicating that the popularity of the discussion did not decrease. They were still in the godly posts. Luo Nan wanted to understand the atmosphere at the time, so he switched the replies to the proper order. He started from the beginning and skimmed through 3 to 5 pages. Most of the messages were, is this real or fake? What a beauty, she's my type. Beware of soul fingerprint collection traps. First-time measurement data, and other hipster messages. Of course, there were also, the current Wu Zetian? She must be a hype, and other idiotic messages that were brutally whipped into corpses. It was very clear that Her Majesty Empress Wu of 3 years ago was not a particularly outstanding character in the world. She did not possess global fame. But it was precisely after this incident that she truly soared to the heavens. She added more and more legendary colors to the world subjugation event. Luo Nan more or less admired her. Even though he felt that the martial empress' secret technique was not as marvelous as it was described in practice, the influence was real. And Her Majesty Empress Wu was capable of shouldering this responsibility. Luo Nan skimmed through a few pages, wanting to change his method. Just thinking about the 360,000 pages was enough to make him collapse. If he really were to read page by page, he would not be able to do anything for the next 10 days to half a month. He used the Hexier's intelligent filtering function to eliminate the boring messages. He only looked at the essential replies. Just like this, there were still over 200 pages left. Many of them were tests of the dripping sword. Some were single columns of data. Some were experimental demonstrations. There were also extremely cruel combat scenes. These were the responses of several tens of thousands of ability users from all over the world toward this technique. However, these dry goods weren't the most popular of the essential posts. It was the era of national entertainment. There were always some funny and amusing messages that grabbed the most eyeballs. Luo Nan saw a string of hilarious scenes of practicing and using the dripping sword. There were all sorts of absurd incidents and all sorts of amusing suicides. The high difficulty of using the dripping sword fueled the vitality of these videos. Luo Nan saw a certain eccentric person use his own mouth to quickly condense water droplets. The result was a tragic explosion. Luo Nan could not refrain from giggling foolishly on the dining table. He watched a string of videos and nearly missed his afternoon class. When he returned to his bedroom to do his afternoon class, he shot a glance at the balcony. He saw the slightly swaying quilt over there. His mind suddenly stirred and he walked straight over. Today's weather was cloudy. Sunlight came and went. The effect of drying the quilt was quite average. The color of the quilt was light and there weren't any decorative designs on it. There were faint halos left on it, just enough to form half a fuzzy human silhouette. Luo Nan used the Hexier's visual camera function to take a picture of the quilt. Of course, he also allowed the water droplets floating in midair to enter the frame. He created the title, "A Morning of Practice in Exchange for Rain." He then posted it to the comments section. This was sharing, right? Luo Nan himself was unclear about the subtle thoughts of a youth. But his mind was still clear. He used anonymous mode. He only showed the location of his registration, which was the Xia City branch. Of course, he also showed the time of his registration. One look and Luo Nan could tell that he was a noob. This newest message soon appeared at the very top of the page. Luo Nan refreshed it twice, but there was no response for the time being. He was happy and went to do his afternoon class. It was already past 1 o'clock in the afternoon by the time he combed through the vital energy of the liver, heart, and spleen. Luo Nan was used to single-mindedly concentrating on cultivation. His mind was filled with similar elements. He had nearly forgotten about small matters like uploading photos. He shifted his attention to the water droplet that still existed. Through his mental senses, he knew that the condensation ring at its core was still stable. Perhaps as long as the supply of his soul strength didn't stop, this thing could continue to exist. The condensation ring was undoubtedly a very good carrier. Luo Nan attempted to use it to further grasp the 5 auxiliary structures of sharpening, amplification, acceleration, and so on. He was just about to replay the reality recording to learn the relevant knowledge when he suddenly recalled an essential reply he had seen during lunch. The starting point of the respondent was that he was dissatisfied with his firing speed in combat. He suspected that Her Majesty Empress Wu was cheating. The respondent started from the beginning of the video, analyzing the authenticity of the reality recording frame by frame. Though he had serious doubts about the authenticity of the recording, the angle was more practical. He used various analysis techniques. He even captured and analyzed the soul strength fluctuations produced by Her Majesty Empress Wu in combat twice. The data was extremely detailed. This would be an excellent starting point if he wanted to replay it. This reply was very long. It was enough to start a series of posts. In fact, this was a link to a hot forum post. The number of replies it drew in was quite large. These replies of replies were distributed in various hot spots in the thread. If the reader was interested, they could see a long string of replies with a light touch of telepathy. Of course, they could also choose to use bullet screen mode, but that was too messy. Luo Nan didn't like it. Anyone who read the thread would inevitably be affected by the hot spots. Luo Nan paid more attention to the ones with a large number of replies. He originally wanted to lock onto the latter half of the lecture, but he stopped midway. He saw a hot spot with over 10,000 replies. What attracted his attention was a scene that left a deep impression on him. It was the moment when Her Majesty Empress Wu suddenly turned her back to the viewer not long after the video started. The poster complained, "I actually took a step back when I saw a beauty. This isn't logical. That's why I became suspicious." The replies instantly went off the mark. Aha. I'm relieved to see the poster take a step back. I really regret it at the time. Step back +1. Regret +1. Step back +1. Regret +10086. Am I the only one to throw myself at her? Raise your hand if you throw yourself at her. Does throwing yourself at her count? You don't even give me a second glance, do you? The poster has already analyzed it below. Everyone is retreating here. The video has a fixed program buried in it. It's to keep you bunch of perverts at a distance. So it was like this. Luo Nan came to a sudden realization when he saw this. So he wasn't the only one who suffered and lost face. This was the common experience of all the participants. The irresistible elements within made up for the young man's wounded heart. But then Luo Nan was confused. The pressure that pierced the weak points of his heart and the fear he felt were also the effects of the program? Chapter 379. Emotional memories were often particularly deep, but they were often distorted. From Luo Nan's impression, he had taken a step back. It was a true reaction of his mind. But the analysis of this quintessential post was reasonable and convincing. This created a contradiction. Should I believe the data, or should I believe my feelings? Luo Nan believed the former for now, but he still harbored some doubts. He continued to read, hoping to find a more decisive and convincing reason. The group of braggers was exposed when they replied to this point. They had a tendency to turn back to the main topic with great difficulty, but not long after, the following comments veered off the mark. The reason was that an ID called Unchangeable Gold had sent an emoticon of someone pinching their fingers fiercely. He added 3 simple words, "I was wondering." This Unchangeable Gold was certainly a public figure. After his reply appeared, a long string of comments directly quoted the contents of his speech. It had become the center of the topic. Boss Gold has been exposed. Queen Wu, be careful of the hooligan. So that's how it is. Gold has always been like this. Boss Gold, represent headquarters in an expedition to Xia City. Most of these comments were from 3 years ago. They called out Her Majesty Empress Wu's nickname from back in the day. The atmosphere was extremely enthusiastic. But this was not the most explosive point. A dozen or so messages later, a certain ID replied with the same quote from Unchangeable Gold. The content was even simpler. It was just a string of ellipses. But it was this simple symbol that caused a group of bored people to clamor as they pounced over. They replied one after another in remembrance. It was no wonder that they were not calm. The person who came later was the true source of all evil, the instigator of all evil. Wu Ming. No one knew what happened back then. The current ID of Her Majesty Empress Wu was dyed with the most distinguished purple-gold color of the society. She was the symbol of a veteran, a powerful person, and a person with real authority in the society. After she personally replied, the comments below truly exploded. One could vaguely feel the fiery atmosphere of the time from the dense overlapping of the messages. But strangely enough, there were still people who came to pay homage to this temporary hot spot. Luo Nan scrolled to the end and saw that the latter half of the replies were mostly, "Boss Gold is dead. Burn incense if you have something to do." Ambition is not far. The soul has returned. I don't believe that boss gold has disappeared. Sit and wait. Missing? The range of public figures who had been missing for 3 years was very small. Luo Nan subconsciously opened up Unexchangeable Gold's personal page. The entire page was gray in color, but the information of his rank, position, achievements, and honor were all preserved. Looking at it this way, it was easy to understand. Back then, Director Jean was most likely a purple gold certified person, which meant that he was the branch president, the headquarters deputy secretary, and a senior elder. Among this group of people, the strength of B class was considered low. The real ones were B plus or even a class, which was the level of extraordinaries. However, he had been missing for many years, so he must have missed the qualification certification process that was held once every 10 years. The relevant benefits were temporarily frozen, and the display of his ID had also become ordinary. Only this locked page and the old posts from back then had some traces left. Luo Nan really did seem to have heard of this before. It was most likely in Bamboo Pole's Notes on the Most Important People of the World course. It shouldn't have been listed separately, but Luo Nan recalled that there had been an extremely famous case of extraordinaries going missing in recent years. The Maple Pavilion case. Luo Nan flipped through the information given to him by Bamboo Pole. His memories from the class became clear. This Mr. Unexchangeable Gold was indeed a legendary character. Rumor had it that he was one of the first capital tycoons to strike it rich after the war. He had a net worth of hundreds of millions, but he had awakened to extraordinary powers by chance. He had been infatuated with them ever since, so much so that he had spent all of his wealth in order to take a step forward in cultivation. Perhaps the heavens had been moved by his determination to spend money, or perhaps the extraordinary powers he had awakened to were truly astonishing. He had advanced to become an extraordinaire in the 80s, becoming one of the most apex existences on the planet. After that, he resumed his old business and entered the sea of business. He opened a chain of hotels called the Maple Pavilion. He had brains and the status of an extraordinaire. He had opened hotels all over the world in a short few years, rushing to enter the top 100. His net worth was even greater than when he had first made his fortune. By now, no matter how one looked at it, this Mr. Unexchangeable Gold was a true winner in life. His experiences were wonderful and perfect. However, normal people couldn't understand the world of great experts. It was unknown what Unexchangeable Gold was thinking. He felt that it wasn't enough to open the Maple Pavilion hotels in the 88 metropolitan areas of the world. He began to operate hotels in the wilderness to do business with vagrants. In the beginning, he really did succeed in a few operations. He gained quite a bit of reputation among the vagrants. However, 3 years ago, he rushed to the wilderness to inspect a new location for his hotel. He suddenly encountered an accident and went missing. According to the results of the investigation at the time, the location where Unexchangeable Gold went missing was a mountainous area of nearly 2,000 square kilometers. The force of the impact pierced through the Earth's crust, detonating dormant volcanoes and changing the terrain. The power of an extraordinaire was terrifying, but it was useless. Those who should have gone missing had gone missing. Bamboo Pole mentioned Unexchangeable Gold during class. He wanted Luo Nan to understand that even an extraordinaire wasn't an omnipotent god. Coincidentally, the specific time of Unexchangeable Gold's disappearance and the time of his reply were 24 hours apart. These were the last traces of him in public before he left the metropolitan area and entered the wilderness. In a certain sense, these words could be considered his last words. Luo Nan finally understood the reason for the abnormal number of replies to a boring topic. In the end, it was because of this. There was clearly a closing song of a tortuous legend hidden within. Sigh. Luo Nan was no exception. He sighed and closed the analysis thread with dull interest. He didn't want to look at it for the time being. If a young man with the highest goal in life was to become an extraordinaire, he would be depressed for an entire day and night upon encountering such a thing. Luckily, Luo Nan's goal was a bit distant from this field. He adjusted himself a bit and stopped looking at the thread. There were other things he could refer to. Luo Nan hadn't looked at the handouts and notes that Papercut had sent him. He planned to spend half the afternoon to understand them. He never expected to discover that this handout actually revolved around the recording of reality after flipping it open. It was tightly integrated. There was nothing to say. Luo Nan could only activate reality and link to reading mode at the same time. He began to work hard. Of course, the handout only brushed over the first few interludes. It mainly started from the moment he discovered the pleated wild boar and entered combat mode. Sure enough, it was just as Papercut said. Her Majesty Empress Wu's personal explanation of the handout was much more detailed. It was also much more profound than the elite replies seen online. In the morning, Luo Nan used a mere 2 hours to train the condensation ring to a certain level. Because of this, he had some doubts about the technical difficulty and actual combat power of the entire dripping sword. But when Luo Nan saw the handouts personally produced by Her Majesty Empress Wu, he had to reflect on his own shallow understanding. Not only did Her Majesty Empress Wu give a thorough analysis of the condensation ring and the 5 auxiliary structures, she also mentioned many of the thoughts she had when making the video. She also added many application techniques, touching upon all kinds of combat environments, unexpected situations, variations of techniques, and so on. From what Luo Nan could sense, Her Majesty Empress Wu used the condensation ring as a foundation. She could add or subtract auxiliary structures at will. She could even add or subtract the condensation ring itself. Her Majesty Empress Wu revolved around the 2 vitals of the enemy, the eyes and the mouth. She could transform into a dozen major categories and hundreds and thousands of killing techniques. Luo Nan didn't quite understand the other categories, but there was a part that involved the nervous system. Just a few words were enough to make his forehead sweat. A small water droplet, through various ways of stimulating the nerves, could achieve 7 or 8 effects such as death, hallucination, paralysis, torture, and so on. Every move was highly maneuverable, as long as one's control ability was up to standard. Such endless transformations, it was simply inconceivable. It was a pity. It was a pity that Papercut had no talent in this area and wasn't very interested. The notes he recorded were a bit superficial. It wasn't very satisfying to look at them. Luo Nan hated himself for feeling guilty last night. He just wanted to dodge He Yuan's warning. Not only did he not get the heart-searing blade video archive, he even skipped over the dripping sword. He read the handouts and notes from beginning to end, but he was not satisfied and wanted to read them again. He didn't expect to find another video at the end of the notes. It wasn't long, only 2 or 3 minutes. It was President Ouyang's concluding speech. Papercut had recorded it on the spur of the moment. At that time, there were more than 100 people sitting in the circular conference room. They were the backbone of the branch. Luo Nan looked around and found a few familiar faces. In the center of the conference room stood Ouyang Chen and Her Majesty the Martial Empress. Slightly to the side, Old Man Yu sat in a wheelchair, occupying a corner. The 3 heavyweights of Xia City appeared in unison. The standard of this intermediate training class was already top-notch. This made Luo Nan look forward to next year's spring training class even more. Generally speaking, the host's speech, the concluding speech, and the like should be relatively empty. They were heavy on flattery and had no substantive content. At first glance, Ouyang Chen's path was also like this. However, his evaluation method and focus were quite to Luo Nan's liking. This was what President Ouyang had said: 50 years have been spent on contemporary research on supernatural powers, from nothing to the current classification. In this period of time, the number of applied techniques alone has exceeded 70,000. Mud and sand have fallen, and fish and dragons are mixed together. I recognize the vast majority of these techniques, but I don't believe that they have any practical value that can be passed down for a long time. These applied techniques are either simple and crude. Some are tedious and complex. Some are profound and abstruse. There are few exceptions. In the future, we will probably only see them in museums. Through them, we can feel this era of barbaric growth. But a year ago, I saw the dripping sword released by Lady Wu. Its usage requirements aren't high, and its consumption isn't great. The vast majority of awakened on the mental side can use it. However, it isn't a simple matter to use it well, to use it fully, and to use it to a high standard. After today's lesson, I am even more convinced that this simple technique can completely squeeze out the potential of an awakened. It can exhaust the imagination of an architect. Even if one reaches the level of an extraordinary, one can still unearth valuable topics from this technique. The conference room in the video was in a bit of an uproar. Clearly, the participants were somewhat unable to accept President Ouyang's high evaluation. Ouyang Chen then gave his explanation. It looks like the dripping sword doesn't touch upon anything essential. But by relying on the 6 simple structures of the mental interfering with the material plane, it has realized far too many changes. It is like the basic material elements can form the entire world. We should also take note of the condensation ring at its most core position. It has an inconceivable possibility. On the microscopic plane, it achieves the highly efficient collection of water molecules through an extremely concise structure. It can completely replace the microscopic ability of extraordinaries. Why is it like this? I have yet to come to a conclusion, but this technique of going from simple to complex, from complex to simple, and switching between simple and complex at will is extremely mature, complete, and high level. So much so that I believe that this is the result of 100 years in advance. As far as the present stage is concerned, there is no way to increase or decrease it. There is nothing to nitpick about. As a user, I can know how it is, but I don't know why it is. But as a researcher, I must bow and pay my respects to this genius and exquisite design. Then President Ouyang really did turn around. He bowed his back toward the faintly smiling Her Majesty Empress Wu. The video ended here. Truly kick-ass. Luo Nan gave this crude praise to both Her Majesty Empress Wu and to President Ouyang. Using an imprecise expression, a water molecule had a diameter of approximately 0.4 nanometers. Even though Luo Nan's soul strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, his precision was barely able to touch the micron level. There was still quite a bit of distance from the nanometer scale. Under normal circumstances, Luo Nan did not know how long it would take for him to effectively collect water molecules by relying solely on his soul strength. But now, a tiny basic structure had accomplished this. Luo Nan was unable to figure out the mysteries within with his current level of knowledge, no matter how hard he tried. The puzzlement was hard to resolve, but it was also full of admiration. So much so that Luo Nan had a thought. It seemed that bowing to this legendary lady was not unacceptable. Another afternoon passed after Luo Nan finished reading the handouts and notes. The condensation ring gathered a small bead of water by Luo Nan's side. It was the size of a fingertip. This was already the limit of its volume. According to Her Majesty Empress Wu, Luo Nan's usage belonged to the thankless type. However, even that legendary lady would never imagine that Luo Nan possessed a production line that produced an unending stream of soul strength. When the in and the out were completely disproportionate, there was no need to measure anymore. It was fine as long as he was willful. With a slight stir of his thoughts, the bead of water he controlled was like a sword pill from a novel. It leaped and flew, coming and going freely in the room, doing as he pleased. The materialization of supernatural abilities gave him a greater sense of achievement compared to the soundless siege hammer. There was only half a day left in his closed-door cultivation. His plans could not keep up with the changes. Luo Nan's cultivation plan was far from reaching his expectations in order to clean up his mess. The dripping sword had become the most unexpected harvest. It should be firmly grasped. What? The star atlas of the format pyramid? Wouldn't that be a huge problem? In any case, Luo Nan had already developed a deep interest in the dripping sword. He even had feelings for it. Chapter 380. Luo Nan decided to press on with a spurt of energy. He grasped the 5 auxiliary structures of the dripping sword. In his opinion, this was possible. The 5 structures of amplification, acceleration, sharpening, explosion, and guidance were all built around the condensation ring. The complexity of the structure was low, and the requirements for precision were also very limited. Especially the range increase, acceleration, and guidance. These three structures that increased the effects of control were just extensions of the condensation ring. Luo Nan only needed an hour to master them very well. Of course, this was partly due to the sturdiness of the condensation ring, which allowed him to practice on it again and again. He did not have to worry that the crude auxiliary structure would explode and cause him to start all over again. Luo Nan was already able to make the fingertip-sized bead of water dance up and down within the room. If he urged it with all his strength, it would be like a streak of water slicing through the air. It would only be able to see the light, but not the shadow. Then it would slap onto the wall. It was truly a tragic car accident. The three auxiliary structures had exploded on the spot, and the water accumulated in the condensation ring had all been left on the wall, flowing down the wall. Only the structure of the condensation ring had withstood the test. Luo Nan also knew that the room wasn't suitable for training, so he cast his gaze towards the sun-covered courtyard. The condensation ring, which was still accumulating water, was driven by Luo Nan to smash into the screen window. The screen window was breathable, but this condensation ring was already at the micron level. The fine mesh had no effect on it. After exiting the window, in just 2 seconds, the auxiliary structure and water were all replenished. Luo Nan had a good feeling as he watched the water vapor gather and scatter around the condensation ring. Controlling the bead of water to fly here and there felt even better. Without the restraints of the ceiling and walls, the water droplets initially flew randomly in the yard, but then they spread out in circles. Finally, they passed through the roofs and branches of the community until they flew more than 2 kilometers away. People came and went in the community on the weekend, but no one noticed the water droplets passing over their heads. Even if they did, they would only catch a glimpse of the light at most. They could not understand the truth behind it. The water droplets that were controlled by soul power could naturally reach the location covered by soul power. However, Luo Nan also comprehended Her Majesty Empress Wu's philosophy as he operated. As the distance between him and the water drop sword grew longer, he needed to expend more soul energy to maintain his connection. It also required many auxiliary structures to adjust. While making use of them, they also had to pay attention to the problem of running in. After all, it was the interference of the mind with the material plane. If there was no order between the two, it would cause unnecessary consumption and interference. As for how to ensure the most effective cooperation, there was only one way: practice. Without going through hundreds or thousands of mistakes, it would be impossible to understand the subtle and complicated relationships hidden within. Needless to say, training full of mistakes also consumed a lot of energy. According to the general knowledge Luo Nan grasped during this period of time, even if the basic structure of the condensation ring wasn't damaged, Luo Nan just needed to adjust the other 3 auxiliary structures. It would take roughly half an hour to reach the limits of a mentally enhanced awakened. However, Luo Nan didn't need to consider the issue of consumption at all. He only felt that the feeling of hitting wherever you pointed, within a range of more than 10 square kilometers, was super cool. He even thought that if he extrapolated from this logic, wouldn't it mean that as long as his soul left his body, wouldn't he be able to run around the streets with the dripping sword? Moreover, with his soul body's sensing range, if he was in the Nade district, he would be able to cover the entire Nade district. If he was in the River Wu district, he would be able to surround the entire River Wu district. How was this dripping sword compared to the flying sword in the ancient legends to behead people? Thoughts spun in and out of his mind, but in the end, he just shook his head in self-mockery. The lethality of the dripping sword was extremely limited, and it was difficult to control and transform it. There was a most basic bottleneck that determined his train of thought to be nothing more than wishful thinking. The out-of-body state was similar to what ancient metaphysics called the yin spirit leaving one's body. There was no material medium. Though one could travel 1,000 miles in one night, one could not do anything to the material world. There was no interference power to speak of. In this way, as long as his soul left his body, the condensation ring would naturally. Luo Nan's mind was suddenly stupefied. After the blank period passed, his previous train of thought was completely washed clean. The following thoughts were like grasslands after a spring or summer rainstorm. They grew endlessly. What would happen? What would happen to the condensation ring after his soul left his body? That's right. Soul strength needed to have a material medium in order to be used in the material world. If he first left his body and then made the condensation ring, his interference power would not reach a certain level. He would never be able to carve it into shape. But now, he had already made the condensation ring in advance. He had embedded this precise structure into the boundary between the mental and material planes. Though its nature was rather subtle, it was already in actual existence from the perspective of the material plane. It was tantamount to him having made a machine. This machine could automatically gather raw materials, water molecules, and carry out production. All that was left for him to do was to fill it with fuel, soul strength. In this way, when his soul left his body, the condensation ring would be the medium. It would be the medium. It would be the medium. It would be the carrier. It would be possible to realize interference. Wasn't that right? Luo Nan lay down on his bed, cutting off all his thoughts. It was better to directly test things out than to think about it. Even if he failed, he would only lose a fine-level condensation ring. At this stage, he would just lose a piece of blue equipment. As he mentally prepared himself, he decisively went into an out-of-body state. In the next second, he pulled his soul out of his body and floated out the window. He floated side by side with the 1 centimeter diameter water bead under the warm afternoon sun. There was quite a bit of time between now and noon, but the slanted rays of sunlight and the dense yang energy in the air still transformed into formless astral winds. They blew endlessly against his soul body, and the consumption of soul strength suddenly rose by a large amount. There were very few B-rank powers who could go into an out-of-body state. Very few of them would brazenly go astray in the day and compete with nature in the first 2 or 3 years after they reached this realm. Student Luo Nan relied on the format pyramid production line to produce soul strength in an unending stream. He had abundant stamina and was able to do this willful method. Luo Nan still didn't consider the problem of consumption. Right now, he only paid attention to the condensation ring. The water bead had yet to collapse on the purely material plane, and there was no obvious wear and tear. As for the condensation ring at its core, it was extremely stable. It steadily consumed soul strength. Everything was calm and tranquil. It was natural. This feeling was like being engraved in a lens. It was preserved in a negative, the moment of a swift paddling through the water. Though the water mark was shallow, it was nearly permanently engraved. The infusion of Luo Nan's soul strength gave this simple remnant image a new layer of color. Through a different form, it obtained a life force. Perhaps there was a problem with the analogy he chose. Right now, Luo Nan's heart was filled with a swift, causing a nearly delusional realization to appear in him. It involved the mutual interference between the mental and material worlds. Luo Nan felt that when the interference occurred earlier, the user seemed to have warped time and space to an extremely small extent. The user had intercepted an extremely minute fragment from the endless river of time that Luo Nan had experienced. Then, the user had used soul strength to endow it with new meaning. Damn it. This topic was too deep. If Luo Nan thought a bit deeper, his brain capacity would explode. Plus, his train of thought had clearly gone astray, so he decisively gave up. In any case, the facts before his eyes verified Luo Nan's initial thoughts. There was no problem at all with continuing to control the condensation ring after his soul left his body. The two naturally intersected. There was a continuation of a timeline and a cause and effect relationship. Who created who? Who attached to who? It formed a very interesting circle. Luo Nan had a faint conjecture. Perhaps other mentally enhanced ability users wanted to use their soul bodies to interfere with the material world. They should have done so through similar methods. That was to first create a stable tool that could be attached to. It could be a condensation ring, a hot air balloon, or a glider. As long as there was a small object that could intervene between the mental and material planes, then it would be like what was said in philosophy classes. Humans create and use tools. They are different from all other animals. Then they change the world. Of course, not just any condensation ring could achieve this function. The condensation ring Luo Nan created was a piece of blue equipment. Yes, it was possible that it was a piece of purple equipment. This condensation ring had certainly crossed a certain threshold in terms of precision. It had met some strict standards. Only then was it able to maintain stability for a long period of time in the boundary zone between the mental and material planes. Only in this way could it become a tool, a machine, and not a mere delusion. Luo Nan's soul soared into the air. His soul strength continued to act on the condensation ring, forming an unquestionable interference force. The water bead's bearing capacity was quite weak. Luo Nan tried to add a bit of force, and the bead collapsed into mist. However, the condensation ring structure remained stable, and it continued to gather water. Luo Nan certainly needed to make adjustments if he wanted to go a step further. Luo Nan pondered over the technique within, but his brain was a bit too excited right now. His train of thought was erratic and hard to control. He had just had some inspiration from micromanipulation when a string of seemingly splendid thoughts suddenly burst forth in his mind. Yet he could not find the reason for them, stirring them into a pot of porridge. All right, this was just a reminder. He should not forget himself from excitement. Perhaps he had overlooked something. He could think deeper. Were there any relevant factors that he had not considered? Luo Nan pondered for a while to no avail, so he changed his perspective. What problems had he not resolved over the past 2 days? Naturally, it was about to retract back. Luo Nan's soul strength drove the condensation ring to meet it. On the mental plane, electricity and the condensation ring structure collided. There's a way. How could there be contact if there was no interference? Luo Nan's joy only lasted for 1/100th of a second before the external neuron's powerful impact crushed through the condensation ring. The accumulated droplets of water simply collapsed into mist, leaving not a single drop behind. The 3 auxiliary structures that supported the condensation ring were instantly wiped out. As for the condensation ring itself, it shook violently. Luo Nan's heart sank. Was the condensation ring's carrying capacity still insufficient? Before Luo Nan could find a basis for his rising and falling emotions, the electricity of the external neuron instantly split apart. It actually followed along the structure of the condensation ring, changing and flowing. It was like a special kind of ink that followed along the traces in the void to re-inject itself. In turn, Luo Nan's soul strength was affected by the pull. It followed the traces left in the void and walked once more. Luo Nan had a clearer understanding of this process. Oh, that's not right. How was this filling? This was simply using the structure of the condensation ring as a mold. Electricity took the lead, and the main body of the external neuron came afterwards. Holy crap! Luo Nan could only watch helplessly as the condensation ring he was so proud of exploded by the external neuron. There was no luck to speak of. Even though Luo Nan had repeated the phrase, blue equipment, 10,000 times in advance, his heart still twitched when things came to a head. It was a good thing that he didn't scream. Just as he hated that he couldn't beat his chest and stamp his feet, a certain stimulus flashed in his mental senses. It was like a red-hot branding iron that pressed down. Luo Nan finally couldn't hold it in. Even though he was in his soul-body state, he still let out a cry. A structure of flowing electricity appeared in the void. It had a diameter of 0.02 millimeters and a thickness of about 1/4. Its shape was smooth and round without edges. It was like a hollow donut, but the volume was completely incomparable. This hollow structure floated in the void, steadily seizing and absorbing Luo Nan's soul strength. At the same time, it absorbed the water molecules in the atmosphere, quickly forming a scale. The first droplet of water was gathered, reflecting the sunlight. It was a riot of colors, like a condensed rainbow. This was the external neuron, but at the same time, it was also the condensation ring. A dove taking over a magpie's nest? Or perhaps it was a rebirth. Chapter 381. A 7 to 8 centimeter long metal thread that was shaped like a spider's web and emitted electricity on the mental plane transformed into a hollow donut with a diameter of 0.02 mm and a thickness of 0.5 mm in front of Luo Nan's eyes. Just like that, it weaved and perhaps condensed and shrank, finally forming a microscopic structure on the micron scale, and displaying a wonderful quality between the material and the spiritual plane. Fine. In any case, Luo Nan had never truly grasped the external neuron's volume, weight, and material. Luo Nan was quite cautious about the new condensation ring floating in the air. His soul force touched it carefully, but the other side was incomparably cooperative. With just a thought, he could control it effortlessly. It felt no different from the previous version. At first, Luo Nan was cautious, but later on, everything went smoothly. He was already unable to distinguish the difference between the two versions of the condensation ring. Subconsciously, he controlled the water droplets to fly up and down in the bedroom. The rest of his brain was occupied with thinking, what concept is this? What is the principle behind this? What kind of trick is this? Why the F***CK? His emotions, which had been muddled by the miraculous changes of the external neuron, finally recovered the momentum that he should have after repeatedly thinking about it to no avail. With a surge of emotions, all of his thoughts were overturned. Even though the scene of Luo Nan seizing his body and exchanging his bones was a wondrous creation, and the mysteries within pointed to the essence of the universe, it was unable to overcome the ecstasy that surged within Luo Nan's mind at this very moment. No matter how good the theory was, it couldn't beat reality, right? Luo Nan already understood the practical significance of the changes. From now on, he could carry the external neuron with him to any place that his soul body could reach. Of course, this also included gear. The human mind was just that strange. No matter how strong the desire in the bottom of one's heart was, one could still remain calm when the goal was just out of reach. However, once the goal was confirmed to be within reach, all the previous cultivation would be instantly broken. Before the pleasant surprise brought by the external neuron faded, Luo Nan's mind was occupied by gear. Luo Nan confirmed that gear hid a great secret. It was a great treasure trove for him. As the key that was most likely to unlock the treasure, the external neuron also hid a big secret. Perhaps only when the two came into contact would they appear at the same time. He didn't know if his conjecture was correct, but how would he know if he didn't try? Luo Nan was a bit unable to control his emotions. He was impatient right now. The soul circled around the bedroom 3 times and came up with 3 reasons. First, today is Sunday, the construction team will not work, there are no miscellaneous people waiting there. Secondly, the soul could leave the body and bring along the external neuron. The micrometer scale structure was equivalent to the cross-section of a spider's silk. It was extremely tiny and could come and go quietly without anyone noticing. Thirdly, it was still early. He could make a round trip within 5 minutes. There was plenty of time to explore. If everything went well, he could come back for dinner. If things didn't go well, he could go back again after dinner. All the reasons were in support. All the conditions were in place. What was there to wait for? Before he could finish his thoughts, his soul body charged out of the room, ignoring the window screens and whatnot. When he reached the courtyard, he flashed out of the neighborhood and charged into the sky. Luo Nan clasped the condensation ring formed from the external neuron, and the flying speed of his soul body was not affected in the slightest. Faint traces of water could be seen in the courtyard, but he disappeared without a trace as soon as he entered the sky. At 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun seemed to be at the same level as the dense forest of skyscrapers. Only the endless light still floated in the clouds. At this time, it was approaching the peak traffic period. Small and medium-sized aircrafts were also shuttling back and forth in the high-altitude traffic layer. The late autumn sun was slightly warm, and the high-altitude airflow was dense and cold. The two intersected, and the impact of Luo Nan's emotions melted a bit. He suddenly came to a realization. The external neuron had a physical body. Only the heavens knew what the consequences would be if it were to collide with something while flying at high speeds. There was nothing wrong with rushing to excavate the treasure, but he was carrying the external neuron. If he were to lose it in a careless operation, he might as well smash his head into his bed and play soccer. Luo Nan was about to fly out of the Nade district by now. His thoughts stirred, and the flying speed of his soul body slowed down a bit. He was a bit further away from the uppermost traffic layer. As for the condensation ring formed from the external neuron, it floated in front of his soul body all this time. The condensed bead of water had lost too much energy from flying at high speeds. It was practically shapeless. Even though it was endlessly replenished, it was still several times smaller than when it was at its peak. An odd thought crossed Luo Nan's mind when he saw this situation. In the next moment, he used his soul strength to guide the external neuron into the interior of his soul body. As long as he didn't get into a car accident, the external neuron would be fine. The feeling of his soul body swallowing the external neuron was very subtle. This was because there was a constant transmission of soul strength between them. After the external neuron was absorbed into his body, this transmission relationship was completely assimilated into the interior of his soul body. The process was roughly like this. The soul body would first pour soul strength into the condensation ring that the external neuron had reconstructed. The power of nothingness would naturally possess the nature of interference power. It would gather the water molecules in the void. Under the high-speed flying state, the bead of water would be lost at every moment, but it would be endlessly replenished. The early stages of the accumulation of water molecules existed on the nanometer scale. Luo Nan could do nothing about it, but he could sense the large-scale condensation of water vapor in the later stages. This feeling was like the soul body inhaling and exhaling water vapor, carrying out a peculiar breathing. It naturally formed a connection with the outside world. In the traditional sense, the soul body was only at the level of a Ein soul. Of course, it was impossible to realize such a connection. In fact, the source of this phenomenon came from the new version of the condensation ring. The interference power emitted by the condensation ring gathered water, and it acted back on the soul body itself. It permeated into every corner of the soul body. And then, Luo Nan's high-speed flight came to an abrupt stop. He hovered high in the sky, and below him was the stream of light from the aircraft whistling past. It was as if the entire city was operating at high speeds. Only he stood alone in the sky, distancing himself from the world below him. He didn't have the leisure to sigh with emotion. He just happened to find an interesting processing machine for his soul strength. This machine swallowed nothing and came out something. It absorbed 0 and came out 1. It burned nothingness and condensed reality. This was the condensation ring. This was the external neuron. As the interference power gradually pervaded, it was as if a set of incorporeal skeletal meridians had been stuffed into the soul body. It was draped with flesh and tendons of the same nature. Well, this description was a bit too exaggerated. A more realistic way of saying this was that Luo Nan's soul body seemed to be plated with a layer of gradually closing incorporeal yet marvelous membrane under the full effect of the interference power. Figuratively speaking, Luo Nan's soul body seemed to have turned into a cloak. Luo Nan's core consciousness resided in the center, and he made contact with the mental and material worlds at the same time through this cloak. The cloak became the facet of the mental and material worlds, intersecting with both planes. It was thin to the point of nothingness, but it had marvelous effects. Luo Nan's consciousness was wrapped in this cloak, and it had a bit of an independent flavor. It seemed that there was an indescribable layer of separation between the mental and material planes. The feeling was subtle. The current Luo Nan was no longer on any plane. Instead, he existed in the interlayer between the mental and material planes. Wherever his mind went, he would sink in that direction. Of course, he was in a soul-body state right now, so he naturally leaned towards the mental plane. The resistance he faced on this side was minimal, close to 0. Forcefully interfering with the material plane would certainly consume a lot more energy, and there would be a few more links. But no matter how much energy was consumed, it was still a breakthrough in his essence. Luo Nan's consciousness suddenly flashed, and the incorporeal cloak stirred. It heavily smacked the nearby void under the surge of soul strength like a storm. Wind appeared out of nowhere under the sunlight, and it transformed into a fine stream. It spun and traveled several dozen meters away, nearly brushing past the upper edge of the high-altitude traffic layer before finally dissipating. The stream of air went far away, and Luo Nan's state of mind was like a whirlpool, endlessly turbulent. However, his state of mind had swelled to the extreme by the time the stream of air dissipated. See? Such a crude attack pattern was able to cause considerable turbulence in the material world. What did this mean? It meant that Luo Nan had leaped out of the stage of soul embodiment, the level of a Yin god. He could truly interfere with the material world, shifting the interference force from the tiny structure of the condensation ring to the entire world. Such progress was like jumping from the ground to the clouds. But under the catalysis of the external neuron, it was logical and natural. This was because this was a jump from nothing to something. It was a qualitative change from 0 to 1. 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, and 3 begets all things. It evolved into limitless possibilities. It was impossible to overstate the great significance of the external neuron from this perspective. And to put it bluntly, all of this was brought about by the external neuron. How did it accomplish this? In the end, what kind of product was it? What else could it do? It could serve as the framework for Luo Nan's God gear. It could serve as the materialization of the structure of nothingness. It could serve as the pivot for the transformation of soul strength. And all of this seemed to have only unearthed a small side of the external neuron. It could do much more. For example, gear, 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 gear. The more doubts Luo Nan had in his mind, the more expectations he had for gear. He knew that this sort of mentality wasn't healthy, but he was unable to endure it no matter what. His soul body suddenly entered a state of flight once more, and its speed increased. Right now, his connection with the outside world grew more and more real. His perception of the late autumn setting sun and the high-altitude cold wind grew clearer and clearer. It was to the point where he forgot himself. He roused his power and howled to his heart's content. He didn't deliberately attack the material world, nor did he have the substantial power to stir the void. But the incorporeal attack on the mental plane still rapidly spread in all directions. It was fortunate that Luo Nan hid himself deep enough on the mental plane. He didn't go to a depth where most ability users could probe and create a major event. Even if he did create a major event, Luo Nan couldn't care less. He cut into the Pingjiang district of Acumen College in the blink of an eye. Gear was already in sight within the range of his mental senses with a radius of over 20 kilometers. At this very moment, there was nothing else that could attract Luo Nan's attention other than gear. But there was a difference in the magnitude of the attractive force within the various regions of gear. Luo Nan's mental senses covered the area, and he locked onto the westernmost region of the building on the ground of gear. It was a large atrium 50 meters deep and 20 meters in diameter. With a sudden jump, Luo Nan's soul body cut into gear. He arrived within the atrium and floated in the center. His feelings of urgency and anticipation suddenly transformed upon reaching his destination. Luo Nan began to become nervous. He was just as anxious as he was before. He was just as anxious as he was now. His emotions transformed to the fullest, not missing a single bit. The fluctuations of his mood didn't affect his perception at all. Within the atrium, the entire structure of gear guided and gave birth to a chilling aura. It was just like what he experienced on that night. Wave after wave of energy gathered here. After the orderly flow of energy shifted, this place lost all dominance and became chaotic. The ticking sounds rang out on the mental plane. They seemed to have a clear rhythm, but they didn't have any direction. It was like someone had purposely messed up a password lock, waiting for a successor who knew the secret to come and crack it. Of course, the successor would need to bring a special key. Luo Nan's soul body floated in the air. He suppressed his turbulent emotions and sensed earnestly for a moment. He confirmed that the current situation was no different from that night. He followed the solution from last time and gave himself a boost. He stirred the chaotic aura within the atrium once more. Last time, Luo Nan's boost revealed a classical visualization structure. It was the geometrical figure of a tetrahedron, inscribed sphere, and circumscribed sphere. But as the format pyramid transformed into a star atlas, the external symbol this time changed into a rotating nebula. Its appearance was greatly different. But the effect was the same. It gave this space a thrust of order. It began the process of cyclotron acceleration like a particle accelerator. Once this process began, there was no option to slow down or stop it. Luo Nan's soul body floated alone in the atrium. He calmly welcomed the crazy scene of layers of restriction, rotation, and acceleration. He also experienced the myriad curtains that fell on the mental plane. The layers of strange information intersected. He knew long ago that the mental plane in his eyes was different from the vast majority of ability users. The mainstream theory of the structure of the mental plane divided the mental plane into 3 zones, 1 region, and 1 domain. It was simple and clear. But from Luo Nan's perspective, the mental plane was a deep multi-layered structure. There were hundreds of layers, thousands of layers, and there was no end. The vast majority of phenomena on the mental plane of the inner world could be calmly explained using general theory. In comparison, Luo Nan's perspective was far too cumbersome and complex. However, Luo Nan had never seen an explanation that was more accurate and appropriate than his multi-layered curtains perspective in describing President Ouyang's logic world. Yes, the logic world. Luo Nan never stopped pondering over the strange phenomena within the atrium over the past 2 days. He already felt that the atrium cyclotron he sensed right now was actually a bit similar to the logic world. At the very least, it was a method of distorting the mental plane. Of course, there were more differences. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.